What is
What
up,
is
guys? Welcome back to another MMA debate with MMA Dynasty. Of course, Lucas Tracy MMA, Jacob Ross MMA. We have Jared Grapples returning, and we have a new guest, Flagrant Sports. We all are on TikTok. We all know each other from TikTok, but we've never all had this panel on the MMA debate, and this is the second episode, so we're excited to get into it. We have a lot of good topics to discuss, and let's just start. Before we get into the first topic, leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think of these debates and what topics would you like to see for the next session. So I'll just introduce this one. And like we did last time, I'm going to ask all of you guys to discuss it first. We'll go from Jared to Flagrant Sports, then to Jacob, and then I'll finish off with my thoughts. And then we could just do like a whole discussion on it. So the first topic is on Gilbert Burns. So I've gone out here and I've said that Gilbert Burns is kind of an overrated grappler in a sense. And I was speaking at it from a point of view where I think his offensive grappling is a little bit overrated. And what I want to ask to follow that up is, how do you determine how good someone is in grappling in MMA? How do you determine how valuable someone's grappling skills are in MMA? Are you going to rank them based on their offensive ability, their defensive ability, both their wins, how much they use their grappling? So I want to start with Jared. What do you think about this?
I think it kind of boils down to it's really contextual. So I do understand the basis. You're saying that he's a little bit overrated, but I feel like it's just like you look at how they're winning fights and how much does their grappling help them with that. And for me, Gilbert Burns, even though sometimes he doesn't finish people and stuff like that, barring the Neil Magny fight just recently, he's able to take people down. He's able to hold people down. And then when people are trying to do that to him, he makes it really, really difficult for that. And I don't think there's too many people that are like Gilbert Burns in that department. But I do see what you're saying when a lot of these people are just like, you can't take him down, you'll just get submitted. And he that's not his style, you know.
So let me ask you, do you think Gilbert Burns is overrated? And again, how do you determine how good of a grappler someone is in the sport of MMA?
Yeah. So sorry if that didn't answer it properly, but I don't think he's overrated. But I feel like the way people kind of analyze it, they hear that Gilbert Burns has won 13 quadrillion jujitsu medals or something, and they're all like, "Oh, well, that guy jujitsu equals submissions. That guy, he's the submission guy," and that's not necessarily the case. But as far as how good he is, I think I absolutely will regard him as like a top tier grappler because not too many people are able to use their background in grappling to win fights like Gilbert Burns is.
Absolutely. All right. Flagrant Sports. What's your take on this? Is Gilbert Burns an overrated grappler? And after that, explain how you would value someone's grappling in the sport of MMA. How do you determine how good they are?
So I would say I don't think he's overrated at all when it comes to his grappling. But a lot of this depends on where do you view him. When people bring up the term overrated, it all depends on what's your rating of him. Do you rate him as the submission threat of a Charles Oliveira? Well, in that case, sure, I guess he is overrated, but Charles Oliveira and Gilbert Burns have two very different styles of jiu-jitsu in MMA. Charles Oliveira's style is I want to get you to the ground no matter what. I'm going to mostly play off of my back. I'm going to throw up nonstop high volume submissions. Whereas Gilbert uses his jiu-jitsu in a more controlling manner and more of a, position, necessarily over a submission. If the submission there, he will of course take it. But I view his jiu-jitsu as a very safe, a very controlling and dominant version of jiu-jitsu. You see his fights against Tyron Woodley, and I'm trying to think some other fights where he just against Neil Magny, like he's not necessarily just playing off of his back, and by doing so, that's necessarily kind of a dangerous game to play. It's all about control, and it's about really smooth guard passing, and a lot of it is just on the basis of that. And as far as determining what makes the best grappler, I think a big part of it is how diverse of a grappler you are. Grappling's interesting because it's not necessarily like striking in MMA, where if we talk about the best striker, we don't say, oh, well, it's different because Piotr Jan's a Thai boxer, but Wonder Boy is a kickboxer, karate guy. We don't really do that. We just kind of say this guy's the best striker because he's the best striker. But for some reason, we kind of section off grappling as wrestling and then jiu-jitsu and sambo. I think, in my opinion, Islam Makhachev is by far the best grappler in MMA. And a lot of that is because of how diverse he is with his grappling. He can take you down with the single leg. He can take you down with the double leg, the body locks, foot sweeps, trips. He can submit you. He's great off his back. He's great on top, suffocating top pressure. One thing Gilbert's great at, hip pressure, head pressure, just keeping you still.
Okay. Great explanation. Great explanation. And I do have a question for you after I give my take. But Jacob, you're next. How do you determine how good of a grappler someone is in MMA? And before that, do you think Gilbert Burns is an overrated grappler?
So first of all, like, I think Gilbert Burns is a good grappler. I think he's a pretty good grappler. But in terms of MMA, I think he is overrated, because you take a fight like he had against Wonder Boy, and you see how Bilal Muhammad handled Wonder Boy. And he handled Wonder Boy a bit easier than Gilbert Burns did. So I think that's something to base it off of. And he's also like talked about as like one of these top level jiu-jitsu guys and being such a threat, when in reality, like, he's had one submission in like the last 4 years. So I think in terms of being like a dangerous grappler, like, yeah, like in terms of dangerous offensive grappler, yeah. But I do think he's a pretty good grappler at more the controlling manner, but no, not in terms of diversity. At least in MMA. So yeah, in terms of how to determine who's like the best grappler and judge it based off that, I agree with Flagrant Sports. Like, it's about diversity, like, you have to be able to do everything, like Islam Makhachev, Chimaev, or like Khabib back in the day, so that's how I base it off of. Not just a guy who could just control someone for 5
Yeah.
rounds.
When Lucas says his point, I actually have a comment on that.
Okay, so I like all of your guys' takes. I like the idea of diversity also being important, of course. One thing that I do have to say is that in terms of ranking how good someone is in grappling, not only am I looking at diversity, what they can do, but I'm also looking at what they've been able to prove in their fights and how consistent they are with their grappling. So, for example, in Islam Makhachev, that is someone that has used their grappling basically for every single one of the fights that they've had in the UFC. And he's been able to finish plenty of the fights on the ground. So I'm looking at danger, how dangerous you are on the ground, how diverse you are. But again, being diverse is very important, but what can you do in MMA? MMA is also a damage-based sport. You need to do some kind of damage on the ground. And if you don't have the best, let's say, ground and pound, you don't have the best striking when you're in the top position, then I have to look at the submissions. So if we have a guy like Gilbert Burns, and I'll answer whether or not I think he's overrated. Of course, he has a very wide array of skills on the ground. He is a diverse grappler, absolutely. But he isn't getting those submissions all that often. And I will say that, yeah, although Gilbert Burns doesn't always choose to go to his grappling because he knows he's a very powerful striker, when he does go to the ground, there are many instances in which I've seen Gilbert Burns try to mount off offense, and it's looked, and I have to just say it, it's looked rather mediocre or just average. And again, this is an MMA damage-based sport. So I'm looking at the fight like he had with Wonder Boy. I'm looking at the one that he had with Tyron Woodley, with Gunnar Nelson. I know some of those guys are decent grapplers, but he hasn't been able to do that much damage on the ground. And there are, in my opinion, better grapplers in the welterweight division. I would say, and I know that this is a little bit of a hot take, not a hot take, but a stretch. I'd say Khamzat looks like the better grappler, although he hasn't had as many chances to prove it in the UFC. To me, when I see a guy like Khamzat Chimaev grapple, that is someone that is both diverse, effective, and consistent on the ground, but also, most importantly, dangerous. And Gilbert Burns absolutely is an incredible jiu-jitsu player. But I'm looking at it from, are you able to take that and actually finish people or do a lot of damage on the ground? He's better than most. And when it comes to getting out of bad positions or aware on the ground, knowing how to get out of danger or to scramble up to his feet, if this were a video game, I would give him a 100 out of 100 ranking. Like, absolutely. The stats would be maxed out. But when it comes to his ability to do things like land strikes on the ground or just submit guys or just smother them and absolutely dominate them, he is not, in my opinion, a top 5 grappler in the sport of MMA right now. I just have to be honest. That's just how it is. So, one thing that you did say, Flagrant Sports, that was very interesting was that when we look at strikers like a Petr Yan or a Wonder Boy, both of them are very different strikers, obviously. Like, Yan loves to go to his boxing. He doesn't throw as many kicks. He is very technical with his kicks, but he's not as flashy. Wonder Boy, on the other hand, is a phenomenal boxer, but he's a lot flashier on the feet, and he can do a lot of things that Petr Yan can't. However, some might actually consider Petr Yan to be, I don't even know if I can say this, but in a way better on the feet because he's harder to take down and therefore he's able to actually deliver more damage. But that's not the greatest point. Actually, I'm going to sidetrack from that. Yeah. So in short, I do think Gilbert Burns is a tiny bit overrated because people speak of him as if he's like this guy that is top 5-ish grapplers in the sport. And I just don't know if I'd say this. Jared Grapples, what were you going to ask me? And then, guys, now let's just open the floor to discussion. We can ask each other questions. But yeah, that's my ultimate take.
Yeah, so it's kind of a two-parter here. So it's like, I feel like a little bit a win is a win when it comes down to it, because some people aren't trying to blow you away. Like, if you look at somebody like different sport, but if you look at the way Floyd Mayweather as like Floyd Money Mayweather would beat people compared to if you look at somebody who's known as like some knockout artist or something like that, we could agree that Floyd Mayweather is one of the best boxers ever, even though he didn't go out there and try to necessarily knock these guys out. Like, Gilbert Burns, even if he's not necessary, even if you see him looking for a guillotine on top of Wonder Boy and not getting it or whatever, it's like, I feel like it's just the fact that he's consistently using his grappling to win that needs to be said there. And then a second thing before I go too long, because I can talk forever. But I feel like that topic of diversity or whatever is really interesting, because I feel like with grappling, because you're physically grabbing and holding on to something, it's super important to be a diverse grappler, because if you grab onto something, you'll stay in that range, So like with Brian Ortega, for instance, he's really good at his submissions and stuff like that, but the dude has some of the worst takedowns I've ever seen. So when he runs into people that he can't take down, he's not going to be able to submit them either, So when you deal with those other guys that are diverse, it's kind of like the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. They'll find the area of grappling you're worst at, and they'll be able to win there. So that's kind of what I had to say there. I'd like to see your guys' opinions on some of that.
That's a great point, because Brian Ortega, if he had good wrestling, would be so much more dangerous. But because his wrestling is so poor, and the fact that he waits so long in the fights to try and utilize his wrestling, it's just I completely agree with you. It's one of his biggest flaws. I think it might hold him back from being a consensus second best grappler, in the UFC, just because of how poor his grappling is. His wrestling, I should say.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like when Gilbert Burns got taken down by Chimaev, that took any possibilities of him being a better grappler than Chimaev. Because that's like, I know like a takedown isn't everything, but we talk about the diversity, and he didn't stuff a takedown by a guy who is like in that discussion. You know what I mean? So I think that makes Chimaev automatically higher.
I was actually going to say something. I was going to say one thing before you said that, Jacob, which is related to your comment. When I'm looking at the best grapplers, because I'm looking at it from a standpoint of who can be the most effective in the sport of MMA, I'm thinking about danger. Would you guys count? And I understand wrestling is definitely a grappling sport. Absolutely. But when I'm looking at the best grapplers in MMA, of course, I'm taking wrestling into account, but I'm mostly concerned with what happens when you're on the ground. And to that point, I would say that although, Khamzat is a phenomenal grappler, Gilbert Burns did stuff that a lot of other guys couldn't do, because if it weren't for Gilbert Burns and his ability to get out of bad positions or just to basically prohibit Khamzat from taking his back, Khamzat would have stuck on him and probably tried to finish him, but he chose not to. So I have to disagree, but I also want to ask you guys, when it comes to grappling, are you mostly looking at what they're doing when they're on the ground, or are you taking wrestling into the equation just as much?
I think that was a point I was actually going to bring up, and I'm glad it got brought up, the Hamzat and Gilbert fight. Well, if you remember, Hamzat was actually kind of disengaging with Gilbert once it hit the ground. Yeah, he was throwing some ground and pound when he had Gilbert hurt, but after his opportunity kind of sailed to finish him on the ground, Hamzat kind of backed away and was asking Gilbert to get up, and Gilbert for a couple of times was actually trying to initiate the wrestling and get it to the ground. So if you can see, like when you watch Kamaru Usman and Hamzat Chimaev, two of the most feared wrestlers in MMA right now, not want to engage with Gilbert Burns on the ground, I think that has to say something about how good he is. And I think just going back to what I was saying about him having a safe style of jiu-jitsu, I can't really think of a point in Gilbert Burns' UFC career where he's ever been in trouble on the ground. There's been one moment where it's kind of gotten close. I remember against Damian Maia, for as short as that fight was, Damian Maia almost had his back. And when Damian Maia has your back, you're in deep trouble. But Gilbert's technique and defense is so amazing that he was able to kind of block Maya's left hook from getting around there and cinching on that body triangle, because if he gets that body triangle on you, that's going to be a lot of trouble and a big headache to deal with. He was able to block it, able to sneak out through the back door. So I think Gilbert, like I said, is just a very technique safe, just a very calm and collected style of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I feel like with a lot of these guys, sort of back to your point about how they look at striking and grappling like it's different. Like, let me use an analogy really fast. Like everybody way back in the day with like prime Dominic Cruz would say like, oh, he's such an amazing striker. But you look at his offense, like his technique and then his ability to actually hurt people, he throws wild chops like this and then still somehow doesn't knock people out. You know what I mean? But because he's able to do all this like slipping punches and using his feet and he's untouchable, people look at him like he's so amazing. So I feel like defense and grappling is that same level of importance. You know what I mean? Because the first important thing to me is, are you using your skills to improve your chance of winning? So like, I think there's even some people that I put as some of the best grapplers in MMA that most people look at as ridiculous takes. Like I think you could argue Robert Whittaker could be up there because nobody's out grappling him. And then he's also going out there and taking people down when he wants to. So you could throw Robert Whittaker in that discussion too. Like,
Jose Aldo.
So let me ask you this. So a big part of it for you is your ability when you're on the defense, right? When you're stuffing takedowns, you're scrambling to your feet.
Using it to win fights. Like
using it to win fights. Okay, got it. I understand that. But there has to be something to be said about your ability to do damage with your grappling or finish fights. So for example, Robert Whittaker, sure, he can use it to stuff takedowns from a guy like Yoel Romero, like Jacare, Derek Brunson. But we've seen him take guys down like Darren Till, and he's barely done anything to them. Now, of course, he's a phenomenal wrestler. He is a good grappler, but he's not able to mount off much, damage on these guys. And at a certain point, when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at, well, this other guy like Hamzat Chimaev or Islam Makhachev, for sure, they're also phenomenal wrestlers, but they're also using their grappling to finish fights. They're using grappling to dominate the fights. Whereas Robert Whittaker, he's not using it nearly as much or in the same way. And I have to look at another guy like Islam as someone that is going to be ranked higher. So my top 3 grapplers in the sport right now, I would say it's definitely Islam Makhachev is number 1. I would throw in Charles Oliveira. I'd put him up there as well. And you know what? I kind of want to throw Beneil Dariush in there, to be honest, but I feel like he hasn't really done enough. I don't know if that's even fair to say, because I might throw a Hamzat in there, but Hamzat, in my opinion, is also not really done enough. So the third is kind of difficult. Maybe I would say Aljamain Sterling. Before I would have maybe thrown in a Glover Teixeira, but this last performance, I don't know about it. But yeah, let me ask you guys, give me your top 3. It's really hard for me to pick like a consensus third or just a clear-cut third, but let me ask you guys what your top 3 grapplers in the sport of MMA are.
I guess I'll go first. Sorry, go ahead.
For me, grappling is just too broad. I do think that because we're agreeing diversity is really important, I'm putting Islam at number one. Nobody takes him down. He takes down everybody. Submissions, a good array of takedowns and stuff like that. So if you can't get your legs, he can do upper body things. He can do trips. Good cage wrestling. So I'm putting him at number one. But really, I feel like I know it's going to be so non-committal, but it's just like I don't even want to list it because I feel like I just have such a broad array of what could make someone a good grappler.
Okay, let me narrow it down. Most dangerous grapplers in
Most
terms of what they're
dangerous?
able to do on the ground with their
Are you talking finishing ability when you say dangerous?
Yeah, let's say that.
Okay, then I'll say Charles and Kamzat for my other two then.
I like the Hamza pick. All right, Jacob and Flagrant Sports. Jacob, you first. What are your top three?
So yeah, no, Jared was saying about like being able to stuff takedowns defensively, stuff like that. And I don't know if you guys remembered, but Kamzat stuffed takedowns from Gilbert Burns too. So
Oh, yeah.
Gilbert Burns was trying to take him down and couldn't. So that has to be taken into account also. But I think number one is Islam. I think number two is Kamzat, and I think number three is Dariush.
What was the third?
Dariush.
Benil Dariush.
Yeah, because I
Jared
think
just
that
walked up the set. It's all good. Benil Dariush. All right, I like that.
yeah, I just think Dariush is more of a diverse grappler than Charles. That's what it comes down to for me.
So you're putting his wrestling in there.
Yeah.
Got
So
it.
I think he could do more than Charles. Obviously, Charles I think is more dangerous in terms of submissions, but I think Dariush. I don't know if Charles can hold the guy down for like 5 rounds like a Dariush could.
I think he's fully capable if
Or
he's
at
in
least
the top
be able to
position, at
take
least.
down guys as easily
Right.
as Dariush could.
Got it.
So I think Dariush is three. I think Charles would be a fourth if I had to.
Which for me, and I just want to say this before Flagrant you chime in, I do want to say that for me, like when I'm looking at grapplers, I'm mostly looking at what they're able to do on the ground when it's there. Now I understand that wrestling's a big part of it, but at some point you have to kind of narrow down the discussion. That's where I do it, right? When I'm looking at wrestlers or just grapplers in general, I might throw a Colby in there. I might throw a guy like Benil in there, but I'm looking at most dangerous right now. So Flagrant, your most dangerous top three grapplers in the sport.
Real quick, I just want to add on to Jacob's point about the Hamzat's takedown defense against Gilbert. Phenomenal. I mean, the fact that the one takedown I can remember Gilbert really attempting on Hamzat didn't even budge, but that's the point. So my top three, my top three, those people are gonna incorporate an aspect I don't think we have touched on yet, and that's clinch work. They're also phenomenal in that aspect too, because a lot of these guys' takedowns come from the clinch. So Islam number one, diverse, much like the great Habib, single legs, double legs, hips, hip throws, all that stuff. We know all the shit. And then number two, I'm gonna go Charles Oliveira. Underrated wrestler. He by no means
I think so too.
Yeah, by no means is he an elite wrestler, but I think he's a very good wrestler. I love watching his performance against Tony Ferguson. He really showcased a lot of his great wrestling, and a lot of his stuff comes from the clinch as well. And he has a very interesting style of takedowns from the clinch. He kind of just he wraps up a body lock, and he kind of just uses his length and leverage to kind of get guys down rather than going for some sort of trip or something in there. And then of course we all know how great his submission ability is, how fun, in my opinion, maybe the most fun guy to watch is like him in T-City, just because of how frequent they throw up submissions. I mean, they make groundworks a treat to watch. Anyways, and then number three, I'm gonna go with Kamaru Usman. I think even though besides the last Leon fight, the two Jorge fight, I guess the one Jorge fight, and then the fights against Colby, he hasn't really shown his wrestling as much as he used to. But I think he showed it in the Leon fight just recently before he got his head kicked in, that whenever he's using his wrestling, he is still one of the best wrestlers in all of MMA, and of course is great in the clinch. And then I want to add two honorable mentions, one being Curtis Blades. I think Curtis Blades is criminally overlooked. I'm glad that he's starting to get to the point now where everyone's calling him underrated, so therefore he's kind of properly rated, so that kind of makes me a little bit happy. But I still think at this point he's criminally underrated, but in his wrestling as well. I think he has a real claim to being like a top 3 heavyweight wrestler of all time, like him and Brock and those guys in that discussion, Cain Velasquez. And then Brian Ortega is my final honorable mention.
Wait,
All right.
something about the Usman one. What about Usman getting his back taken pretty much by Leon though? A guy who's just not that great at grappling.
That's
Like,
fair.
like,
I mean,
that would never happen to Chimaev or like I just can't see that happening to like a Chimaev, an Islam, maybe not a Colby.
but Islam got his back taken by Thiago Moises.
Thiago Moises is a better grappler than Leon Edwards.
He is, but
I would say
let's
this.
not.
I would say this. Leon Edwards is actually, after the Wonder Boy fight, people started saying Wonder Boy could fuck up Leon, that he had with Kevin Holland. Leon is actually pretty underrated on the ground.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's what I was
some
gonna
really
say.
good skills.
He can take down some people pretty
right.
consistently. He's not amazing, but I feel like Kamaru Usman kind of wasn't expecting Leon to try to go there.
But then he
Exactly.
ended up letting him get the back though. You know what I mean? Like it was like more than just that.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Like, it's not, Usman's not necessarily known for being this great jiu-jitsu guy where he's not going to give up any sort of compromised position. Yeah, that is a fair point. Whenever we're getting to these top guys, those moments really matter. I mean, Charles Oliveira's been submitted 5 times, but that's just the nature of his grappling style, where he's high risk, high reward. I think Leon is a very underrated grappler. I think also you look at the way he was able to take down Usman. He removed a couple of the best things about Usman's takedown defense. Is one, his forward pressure. Usman's forward pressure really negates a lot of takedowns, makes them more sloppier because you're on your back foot. He took away his sprawl because the takedown came from a outside body lock trip, so he can't sprawl at all. Usman's sprawl is phenomenal, and so he was able to just a lot of that was shock factor too, like the Gus Jones thing. It's just you're not expecting this striker to really take you down, and yeah, his back did get taken, but so did like Shevchenko against Santos. So like,
right,
it happens, and not like Shevchenko's like this phenomenal grappler. She's good, but like it happens.
All right. That was a great discussion. On to the next one. This one is pretty similar. Strikers. Is Sean O'Malley the best striker in the UFC? If not, who is the best striker in the UFC? And what are you looking for when you're trying to determine that? Jared Grapples, you're up first.
I mean, 1 second. All right, I had like a weird mute situation going on. All right, so in my opinion, what makes the best striker is I feel like it's all circling down to your ability to get wins and stuff like that. So like some people you might see them consistently winning and stuff, but are they being presented with something that you think would give them struggles or whatever, but like they just haven't seen that or whatever yet. You know what I mean? So I feel like I want to see Sean O'Malley. I want to see him face somebody that's a really consistent leg kicker that's consistently going after that, because I mean, like there's people have questions about his durability there and stuff like that, and it's just difficult to know right now. I want to see some more people that are going to utilize the clinch not to grapple with them, but utilize the clinch just to kind of bully him around and stuff like that in there, land some elbows and stuff like that. Like how Corey Sandhagen versus Piotr Jan, they were constantly doing these hand traps into elbows and stuff like that. I want to see that style of fight with Sean O'Malley, just because there's he's not the most active guy necessarily. I'm not saying that he's inactive, but it's just like we don't have the body of work to look for. So I think it's too early to say the best, but I think there's some people that would say like hands down, he can't be anywhere near the top. And I think we seriously just don't know.
Flagrant.
It's tough because it's hard to say he's the best striker in the UFC when there's 2 guys at 135 who are arguably better strikers than him. So it's hard to say he's the best striker when Piotr Jan and Corey Sandhagen, both in his own division, are arguably better strikers. And he did fight Piotr Jan, and a lot of it was a good amount of striking. The difference, was Piotr Jan was, trying to get O'Malley on his back. But I think you also have to look at guys like Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, Alex Pereira, Ciryl Gane. These guys are phenomenal when it comes to distance management and feinting and, just just offering you a whole bunch of different options that you have to focus about, overstimulating your brain with, okay, he's feinting with the rear hip to the leg. Okay, well now he's going up top with it. He's just they give you so much that I don't think O'Malley necessarily gives you. He does to a certain extent, but I think guys like Israel Adesanya and Volkanovski are the two best. And I know, Lucas, I saw you crack a little bit of a smile there. I know Adesanya might not be your boy, but I think those two guys are towards the top for me.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm sorry because I know Jacob has to say his piece there, but I feel like in the case of Israel Adesanya, it's sort of like the margin that he's beating these guys and stuff like that. Like I'm not even looking at the Alex loss or whatever. I'm looking at as far back as Yoel Romero or whatever, where it's just like he leaves it so close that some people still think he got robbed there and stuff like that. And I feel like it's just like um when you leave those discussions, it does legitimately knock you down. You know what I mean?
I completely that is completely the epitome of my take on Izzy not being on the same level as a guy like Alexander Volkanovski, because again, when he's taking on these guys that shouldn't even fucking be the gum on his shoe, he leaves it so close. Like with a Jared Cannonier. Now I understand he convincingly beat Jared Cannonier, but you can make the argument that Jared Cannonier stole a round or two, and in the rounds that he clearly lost, they were close. So Yoel Romero, as you mentioned, a lot of people actually thought that he won that fight with his significant strikes, and he has also lost to Jan Blachowicz. He got outstruck by Jan Blachowicz, and he's lost to guys like Pereira. He's got outboxed before, like by Robert Whitaker. So I completely agree with that. I have to say.
I also think it makes it worse that Robert Whitaker is beating those same guys, but worse, but like easier, like he's dominating those guys that Izzy's dominating by using his striking,
in 3-round fights.
In 3-round fights,
co-main events.
Well, hold on. The Gastelum fight was no 3-rounder, and he schooled KG, absolutely schooled him. Had no adversity.
That's fair. No, I'll give you that.
Was the Cannonier one 3-rounder or 5-rounder?
The Cannonier was a 3-rounder.
Wait, which was it? Till 5 rounds?
Till was 5 rounds, but that was razor close, and Izzy never fought him anyway.
Also, Vettori.
A little bit of devil's advocate here. Another thing is, it's like some people, like if you tried to call Anthony Johnson one of the best strikers of all time, people would be all like, "Well, he just hits really hard. He's not actually that great or whatever." And I feel like when you look at it, it sort of goes back into that diversity thing. And when you look at Israel Adesanya or whatever, how much of his ability to dominate is because of his height and all of these things? I don't personally subscribe to that. I think you're allowed to use your physical advantage and stuff like that. But there's people that are they're able to beat a wider array of people. I feel like if Israel Adesanya were facing people with different frames and stuff like that, he'd be struggling a little bit more than he's struggling.
See, I gotta disagree with this narrative that Robert Whitaker has beaten Israel Adesanya's opponents in more dominant fashion. In my opinion, that second Vettori fight is one of the most overlooked performances in the last couple of years in a title fight. I think he absolutely schooled Vettori in not only the striking, but in the grappling too. Vettori couldn't really land a whole lot of takedowns, and the takedowns that he did land were after numerous attempts, and when he did land them, Adesanya was reversing positions. He was getting back up. He was getting himself out of compromised situations. And the Jan Blachowicz thing, though, the difference in that fight was the grappling in the last 2 rounds, and I think part of the third. I can't really remember off the top of my head. The first 2 rounds were extremely close, and so was that third one. I think what made the difference was Jan's size, and I do want to give Jan credit. Jan is a pretty masterful defensive striker, very patient, great at guarding low kicks and just kicks in general. And he did a fantastic job at timing up whenever Israel Adesanya kind of evades from strikes. He leans back, he'll throw a lot of hooks, and whenever your shoulders are kind of behind your hips like that, it leaves you open for takedowns, and he took full advantage of that, and full credit to him. But this narrative that Whitaker has just it reminds me of when people were saying that Charles was beating Khabib's opponents in better fashion and much quicker. It's just not true. We have to also take into account that these are 3-round fights that Whitaker's fighting in. And also, I don't even want to get into the one-on-one comparison between them because they've already fought twice. But I just think that narrative is just completely bogus. But I don't know how y'all feel about it.
Jacob, you give your point, and then I'll give my take.
Yeah, so no, I think it's completely actually different than the Khabib thing because I think Khabib, those fights still weren't close though. You know what I mean? Like the Dustin
Fair.
Poirier Khabib fight was not close. Yeah, Charles finished him quicker and whatever. Same with Gaethje, but those fights weren't like razor close like a Israel Adesanya against like a who did Jared Cannonier or something like that.
Kelvin Gastelum, yeah.
Yeah, or like yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's a difference in my opinion. And 3-round, 5-rounder, that's a decent point. But at the same time, do you really think like Izzy's gonna change his whole style just for a 3-rounder? Because I don't, you know.
It's mainly an opponent thing. Vittori is a type of guy where he relies a lot on his cardio and pace and pressure, and a lot of that builds over 5 rounds. But also, you brought up the Volk. We talk about Volk too, and how you can't compare Adesanya to Volk because Adesanya has struggled in the striking department against other guys. Well, is this the same Volkanovski that got dropped twice by Max Holloway? The same Volkanovski that didn't he get dropped by Chad Mendez?
I mean, that's why I don't have Volk in my top 3. But
Right. No, that's fair.
I don't have Volk in my top 3. But Luke,
I think we just got to be consistent with
I just feel like there's a huge difference between like if we're talking
and also I just want to say Izzy just got knocked out. So
that's fair.
I feel like there's a huge difference when we're talking about he arguably got knocked down because you're talking about like the spinning back kick to the body that knocked him over, right?
No, with Max?
Yeah.
No, Max
I don't
head
think
kicked
that was a head
and
kick.
then uppercut.
He landed in the head. Yeah. Right. I know what you're talking
then
about.
Mendez was just
Anyway, regardless. I feel like there's a big difference between Max Holloway, like most significant strikes and all these other records and stuff like that. There's a big difference between that and then we're talking about like Yoel Romero, the oldest he's ever been in the UFC. Kelvin,
but he's still a freak, man.
Yeah, Yoel is a freak, but the point is
there's more of it, and I feel like Max Holloway is regarded as higher level than all of those guys that he's had those closer fights with.
I would agree. With that. And also you have to look at the fact that Volkanovski, in my opinion, I think that at most between those or out of those 3 fights, Max Holloway is lucky to be given 3 rounds out of those 15. Sure. I think it's more likely that he won 2 out of 15. So that's a massive statement from a guy like Volkanovski. And then you have to look at his performances over Brian Ortega. Of course, the Korean Zombie was a little bit older, but his performance over Chad Mendez gives everyone a tough fight. Look at Chad Mendez's fight with, Conor McGregor. Yeah. He landed a lot of damage on Conor in the first round.
He was older though against Volk.
Yeah, he was older, but it's just a different style. And Volk also had to worry about those takedowns as well. I think that when it comes to determining who the best striker is, for me, it's how effective you are. So obviously you have to do a lot of damage. You have to win your fights. And then I want to see, are you winning them dominantly? Are you leaving any questions? Israel Adesanya, to me, is not in the discussion for like a number 1, number 2, or number 3 best striker in the UFC just because he's been outstruck on multiple occasions. He has, especially by Jan. I understand that, of course, Jan got the last 2 rounds with his grappling. The 3rd round was very close. Some people can give that to Izzy, but Jan undoubtedly won the first 2 rounds with only his striking. And that's just a fact. Like,
he also got knocked out by Pereira.
You think Jan 50-45 Dizzy?
I don't think I think he at the very bare minimum 49-46 him. Like, you know what I mean? The bare minimum.
There's a case.
I think 50-45 is a great argument, but I don't get Izzy cannot win more than 1 round in that fight. I understand that the first 2 rounds were close, but they were no closer than Israel's winning rounds over a Jared Cannonier.
Can I admit something that I haven't said publicly? I actually fell asleep. I'm one of the, I'm one of the biggest.
I fell asleep in the 4th round of Jared Cannonier Izzy
I,
too.
I'm one of the biggest Izzy fans. I love watching him fight. You can just pick so much stuff from it. But oh my God, I mean, I fell asleep during his fight against Jared Cannonier, and it wasn't like I was laying down and watching it and kind of
Right.
sleepy. I was sitting like I'm sitting right now at my desk watching it. My face was in my keyboard. I woke up and I saw it was like the 5th round, and they were hugging each other in the clinch. So.
Same. That happened to me in the Vittori fight too. In the same round, the 4th round, I'm sitting like we are here, and I can't help it. So that's just the fucking truth.
My mom is all into supporting these like black fighters and stuff like that. She's like, "Oh, Israel Adesanya, he's from Africa." She actually fell asleep. She never falls asleep when I show her MMA fight. She actually fell asleep in that Yan fight.
Okay.
In the Yan fight, damn. Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I can understand that if you don't know who they are going into it, you know.
You
what I
don't
mean?
know the
But,
stakes either.
yeah, you don't know the stakes of that. And I picked Izzy to win that going into it.
Me too.
Most people were. So, okay. So back to the Sean O'Malley question. Sean O'Malley, it's hard to make the argument that Petr Yan is the better striker, just given what we've seen. Now, as someone that thinks that Petr Yan won that fight, and I also think that if it were to go 5 rounds, Petr Yan would have won 100% in my opinion. Maybe not 100%, but he probably would have won and probably would have got the finish. It's hard to not say that Sean O'Malley is the superior striker when he outstruck Petr Yan in the 1st and 3rd round pretty clearly. Now, the reason why I gave Yan the fight was because I do put some stake into his takedowns. Now, of course, he wasn't doing much damage with them, but he landed a lot of takedowns, and he was kind of bullying O'Malley. The 1st round was very close, and Petr Yan has his different strengths. I feel like he just seems a little more crisp with some of his techniques, like his switch kicks to the body, his roundhouse kicks. His boxing, I would say, is just as good as Sean O'Malley's. But again, Sean O'Malley has the longer reach. He's basically just as fast as Petr Yan, especially his ability to keep distance. He's very creative too. He has a diverse array of skills on the feet, right? But I don't know. It's kind of hard to say Petr Yan's the better striker there. I mean, I feel like he kind of met his match with a longer, faster guy and a more powerful guy than, Corey Sandhagen, who wasn't able to hurt Yan at all in their 5-round fight. O'Malley at one point did have Yan on stilts. Now, of course, Yan had the biggest moment in the fight where he landed that big right hand on Sean O'Malley, and Sean O'Malley had to grab onto him to make sure he didn't fall down. But I don't know, man. Sean O'Malley, to me, I feel like he could whoop up a Corey Sandhagen. And I think that this is very important too. When I'm looking at the bantamweight division, to me, that might just be the highest level of skill we see in the UFC, those bantamweights, because they could do it all. And they're incredibly fast. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
a guy like Petr Yan is just going to be more skilled than the average middleweight or welterweight in the striking 100%. I mean, even a 10th ranked bantamweight's probably better at striking than your average top 5 guy in the upper weight classes. But do you guys take that into account? The fact that it's 135 and that's probably the most skilled division outside of, the lightweight division?
I think
100%.
you have to, especially when you do it against a guy like Petr Yan, who before that fight was considered potentially the best boxer in the UFC. You know what I mean? He literally, to bring up the Sandhagen point, Sean O'Malley hurt him twice in that fight, and it was 3 rounds. Sandhagen didn't hurt him a single time in that fight. I mean, by the 2 times, I think it was a left hand or something, and then Yan rocked him with that right hand. And then in the 3rd round, it was the knee that cut him up. And Sandhagen did not have any moments close to that. So, yeah, no, I think he's in front of Sandhagen for sure. I think he's also has to be in front of Yan, I mean, he made Yan shoot for takedowns. You know what I mean? If Yan was confident enough in his striking, I think he wouldn't have shot for takedowns.
I can't agree with that, because it looked like that was Jan's game plan from the get-go. I think that in the 3rd round,
however, why if he was so confident in his striking, he wouldn't have did that?
Because this isn't an ego contest. It's MMA.
Yeah.
He's not going to go in there. I mean, there are fighters like a young John Jones who would just go in there just to prove a point. But that was John Jones. I think the path of least resistance against an O'Malley was the grappling. And I think a big part of it is, determining the best strikers. Let's look at, we can look at the head-on heads, and, that's a very powerful thing to look at, because at the end of the day, they're going against each other. But also, let's look at who they've gone against striking wise. You look at the masterclass that Yan had against Aldo. That was a masterful fight. You look at the the Corey Sandhagen fight. You know, who's the best striker that Sean O'Malley has gone against besides Piotr Jan?
Ricky Paiva.
Yeah, Cheeto Vera.
Probably oh, I'm sorry, Cheeto, but like I don't count that fight.
Right, you know, he got finished. And then Rob Font, or was it Rob Font that
I really don't
or
think
no,
you could
Pedro
put
Munoz,
much
my
into
bad.
that Cheeto fight. I understand that he did get finished, but there was like a fluky injury in there.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess. But also at the same time, like, you know, the Pedro Munoz fight, that wasn't going great for O'Malley,
Yeah.
with the leg kicks and all that. I just think that when you look at level competition, you can say the same for Corey Sandhagen going against guys like Piotr Jan. And yeah, I mean, he pretty much did get dominated by Piotr Jan in the striking department. It at least was competitive, close, like to start the fight, and then he's at least gone against those level of guys. He's gone against a Song Yadong. He's gone against some really good strikers that I just don't know if you can say the same for O'Malley.
But
Yeah,
why did O'Malley win the fight though? That's the thing.
I just want to say this. I just want to say this before you mention that. Yeah, so you're basically saying that it was a very close fight, and Piotr Jan's also like beat up a bunch of other high level strikers that Sean O'Malley hasn't even faced yet. So that's a big part of it. So the Jan fight with O'Malley, even on the feet, was kind of closely contested.
Yeah.
And I still have Jan in like my top 10, maybe in the UFC. Oh, without a doubt, not maybe. Top 5, I don't know, man. I would definitely say my number one best striker right now is Volk. And I think, again, I have to put him even higher than Alex Pereira because he is in the lighter weight classes. And I feel like Pereira, although he has the better credentials, without a doubt, and he's taken out guys like Izzy and he's knocked out a bunch of kickboxers. This is MMA. I'm looking at how good of a striker are you in MMA, and I need to see him do that against some more guys. I'm not ready to say he's better than Volk. Jacob, I want to hear what you have to say. And after that, I want to ask all of you guys to give your top 3 best strikers. I know, Jared, it's going to be difficult because you have a lot of different picks, but try to think of 3 that you'd have to at least consider, you know?
Yeah, so my point about the Jan O'Malley is like, yeah, O'Malley hasn't beaten as many good, or at least hasn't had as many like high level striking performances against higher level competition. But the reason he did beat Jan was because of his striking. You know what I mean? So I think automatically like that makes him in front of Jan, if that makes any sense. Because he didn't beat him because of his wrestling.
That's fair.
Beat him straight up because of his striking. So I think that has to be, you know, that's the difference in my opinion.
All right. We're going to do the top 3 best strikers in the UFC. I'm just going to give mine. I'd say Volk. I'd say Alex Pereira. And I might just throw in Cyril Gane. Honestly, I feel like Cyril Gane as a heavyweight, it looks unreal. I mean, I understand he's a heavier guy, but he does not strike like even a 205er strikes. I mean, Cyril Gane to me is extremely impressive. He didn't get touched by Francis Ngannou. Of course, he got dropped by Tai Tuivasa, but like Volk has been dropped before. And I understand Tai Tuivasa isn't Max Holloway, but I feel like, you know, he kind of got that back. Like his level of domination over Tuivasa, basically, you know, to me, that kind of gets rid of the doubt that I would have seeing him get dropped. So those are my top 3 right now. I think I could make an argument for some other guys too. But Jared Grapples, let's hear your top 3 strikers in MMA.
Right. I'm sorry, man, but I got 4.
Okay, 4.
All right, but I'm saying Volkanovski. I gotta agree with you there. I also agree with Cyril Gane. Yes, he's facing like these heavyweights and stuff like that, but you gotta fight the competition ahead of you. And I feel like the way he deals with it, it's not really been seen before, aside from how he got clipped by Tai Tuivasa. I'm gonna throw in Wonder Boy because
man, I completely
even if we ignore that Kevin Holland fight, the way that he just absolutely dismantled Jeff Neal and stuff like that, the dude looks superhuman. Vicente Luque before Jeff Neal rearranged his brain. And then I'm gonna also throw in Alex Pereira with a good matchup, just because I feel like with a bad matchup, I feel like he's probably gonna be dropping his hands to defend takedowns. Like that's the reason why I thought Sean Strickland had a chance a lot of it, because Bruno Silva was chinning him up and stuff like that, because he was shooting nonstop. I feel like if he's shooting nonstop and defending takedowns, his striking is going to be at like 50%.
Man, I should have put Wonder Boy would be my honorable mention, but Flagrant Sports top 3.
Oof. Okay. Number 1, I'm gonna go Volk. Number two, I'm going Surreal Gone. I think it's so funny that we have to like put an asterisk that like, yeah, he got rocked against Tai Tuivasa, but that just shows you how high his freaking standard is. To say he got rocked in the heavyweight division and he's fought there like 7 times, it's like, dude, like who hasn't gotten dropped at heavyweight? Like that's the nature of heavyweight. It's why there's been like 26 title changes because it's a chaotic division. And for him to just like, I think it is important and noteworthy that he can move the way he moves at that weight class. I think that's a big part of it. So I would go, I would go Volk. I would go Surreal Gone. Ooh, that third spot's tough. I could put a Piotr Jan there. I could put a Corey Sandhagen. I could put an Israel Adesanya. I could put, man.
No O'Malley's.
O'Malley's close. He's close. I'm gonna go Piotr Jan. I just think the body of work that he has shown against the best strikers in that division, it can't be overlooked. Like the Aldo fight and the Corey Sandhagen fight, man. I mean, he just looked masterful in those.
Yeah, for me, I got number one. It's gonna be Pereira. The Gon point was very good, and the fact that he's only gotten rocked once in heavyweight and he didn't get rocked by Francis Ngannou when they fought, like that's extremely impressive. But I still like would prefer a guy who's lighter, like has a lighter weight class. You know what I mean? I just think that they have better skill and talent overall. So that's why he's not in my top three. But I got Pereira number one. Finished Israel Adesanya, highest level of kickboxer. You cannot stand in front of the guy. Like you can't. You can ask Sean Strickland. You can't stand in front of him for any time in the fights, unless like you're Adesanya, and he ended up getting finished. So I think Pereira's got to be number one for me. Number two has got to be Sean O'Malley, just because he's a lighter weight class. He outstruck Peter Yan, who, in my opinion, is probably top 5. So, I got O'Malley. I think he's very diverse. I think his creativity is ridiculous. Maybe not as much in terms of kicks, but in terms of punches, like it's very good. And then number 3, I would say I'm between. I think maybe Wonder Boy or Volk. It's either Wonder Boy or Volk, but I'm gonna say Volk right now. What he did to Max Holloway was ridiculous. Max Holloway was considered one of the best boxers in the UFC, if not the best. I didn't agree with it. I thought he was too hittable, but nonetheless, like he smoked him. Wasn't close at all, 50-45. What he did to he even fought Aldo also. What he did to Aldo, Ortega. So I have to have him top 3. I know I said it, he wasn't in my top 3 before, but then I really thought about it and now he is. But honorable mentions, I think Rafael Fiziev. I think he may be the best Muay Thai fighter in the UFC straight up.
Great pick.
I'm waiting for him to do it against a guy like a higher level guy like a Gaethje or a Poirier, something like that. And then once he does that against one of those guys, he's right in my top 3. Because if you guys didn't know, like at Tiger Muay Thai, he's the one who's teaching these Peter Yans, these Kai Car Francis, these Israel Adesanyas, these Alexander Volkanovski. They're learning from Fiziev. So I think Fiziev one big win away from being right in that top 3 spot. So
can I give one more honorable mention? I didn't even really give him Rose Namajunas. Maybe not like I know previous most latest.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good.
I know the Carlos.
It just caught us off guard.
Yeah, no, I know. But Rose Namajunas is one of my favorite fighters ever. She's probably one of my top 3 favorite fighters ever. Last fight
she
absolutely
is extremely
sucked.
good on the feet.
The power she possesses at strawweight's very impressive. Her technique, her footwork is so gorgeous to watch. Like the way she just kind of moves all over the octagon, amazing to watch. Her knockout of Wei Li, and then Jacek. Her second fight against Andrade, where she showed some masterful counter striking, like just the Trevor Whitman special when it comes to counter striking.
She's definitely the best in that whole Trevor Whitman.
Yeah, I named my dog after her. That's how much I love her. Sorry.
Can I say something about Piotr Jan really fast?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to talk too long on this because I'm not really trying to change the subject, but it's like I feel like to some extent people overrate his fight IQ and stuff like that. When I say overrate, that's not to say that he's not really intelligent and all this stuff, But I feel like whenever people talk about how intelligent they're all like, bro, he downloads this information.
Yeah.
And it's just like
Yeah.
the decision making. We know for a fact, like, there's no way that you could be a professional fighter at that level and not read the rules. Kneeing somebody, that's fight IQ. That is still fight IQ. You
It
know
is.
what I mean? And I feel like the not showing takedowns and stuff like that sooner versus Sean O'Malley. Did he shoot in the first round before getting hurt or no?
End of the round.
End of the round?
Yeah, he
Like,
shot
I
at
feel
the
like
end,
there's
I guess.
certain
I mean, he didn't get
decisions
hurt in
that
the first round. I mean, like I agree with you. Sorry, Jared. Like I'm gonna like I'll let you continue, but this is to add on to that. Yeah, like I completely agree. I mean, like his whole thing for this 3-round fight against O'Malley was to be efficient and to like not let it like go to the judges at least. You know what I mean? Like to win like convincingly. And that first round, like in the beginning of the round, like and like not starting slow, he was still like, yeah, he was marching forward. He was kind of just throwing these like calf kicks and stuff like that, while O'Malley was like actually like throwing punches, you know, to the head and stuff like that. So yeah, no, I agree. That's the IQ is just not there. And waiting till later in the round to
Dude,
shoot.
that illegal knee, like if he had never thrown that, he still would have been a champion, without a doubt.
And then the last thing that I have to say there is even the second Aljamain Sterling fight and stuff like that, and just notoriously how it's like, it doesn't count that he lost those rounds. He takes the first rounds off. That's a choice.
That's why he lost that fight, and that's why he lost
doing
the
bad
last.
things
You know,
in the early
yeah,
rounds
he
doesn't magically
needs
just not count because it's Petr Yan.
Petr Yan needs to change something about his style, because again, like there's if you're not getting blown out and you're winning the fourth and fifth round consistently, but you just can't for the life of you take the first or second round, like unless it's like a high paced fight, then you need to change something. The last time he had a really good first round was against Jose Aldo, who he even hurt in that first round. He hurt him really badly, threw like a really good punch to his body when Aldo was on the ground. But other than that, like he's consistently losing rounds that he doesn't have to be losing. And he could be winning them. And I feel like he's skilled enough to win them. Maybe he's worried about gassing out. Maybe he's kind of like taking the same approach of like a Yoel, where they don't want to go out on a burst too often and they use certain rounds to really explode on guys. But I don't know. He's got to do something. So I think that's a good take.
At least for the top level guys, you know?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can we mention
All
real
right.
Like I
quick
think I'll be able
Robert
to do it to
Whitaker?
Marab, like, you know? Wait, what were you saying?
I just want to add Robert Whitaker. That's all I want to do. Just add a name in there.
I like that.
Whitaker is definitely in my top 10 right now. All right. The next thing that I want to discuss is immediate rematches and if they're being used incorrectly. So the UFC doesn't have like these weird immediate rematch clauses that boxing has, where, you know, a guy like the Korean Zombie is going to get an immediate rematch with Volk or something. But often we have dominant champions. As soon as they lose, they get to fight for the belt again. Are immediate rematches being used correctly? Do you want to see immediate rematches at all? Jared Grapples, the floor is yours. What do you think?
Thank you. Never. I hate them always. And I know there's some people that are gonna be all like, maybe even some of you that are gonna be all like, well, if you're a dominant champion, I can kind of understand it. It's like, in my opinion, the whole point of the division is like the reason why like the whole structure we have now is because the UFC was originally on a tournament format. It's to prove who deserves it the most. You know, the person who wins a tournament doesn't just automatically get put into the finals with the other dude that wins a tournament. You get re-entered into the tournament the next time around. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you're the champion and you lose, you got to go back into the same process everybody else does and stuff.
Or
like
at least
that.
win a fight, one fight, you know?
Yeah, even just one fight. Even just one fight. I do understand that if you're head and shoulders above the rest, it doesn't make sense to throw you all the way back down to 15 or something like that. But even like Max Holloway loses to Volk and then he gets a couple wins, that's good. But it's unacceptable that we saw the same matchup 4 times with Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo. I thought we could have seen it like the first time we got a decisive victor, we could have seen it, and then somebody could have fought back from that. You know what I mean? I'm really tired of how they use these immediate rematches.
All right, Flagrant.
I agree. I think I 100% agree that even though for the most part the 4 fights were fun, I think it's ridiculous that we had to watch these guys fight 4 times. Under the only fight that was in between for a title was an interim title because Figgy couldn't fight. Like, it's just ridiculous. I think the UFC abuses immediate rematches. I think Max versus Volk won. I think after that fight, did we need to see an immediate rematch? I get Max was this established champion, but it's just like there's certain fights that just do not warrant an immediate rematch. And then one thing that's going to be annoying is like, so Izzy Pereira, if they fight again and Izzy wins, do we have to see a trilogy now? Is that going to hold up at a division? And it's just it's very frustrating to see this immediate rematch, and then if the other guy wins, then we have to see a trilogy. And I guess at 85 it doesn't matter a whole lot because the division kind of sucks, but it's really frustrating to see the UFC just constantly give us rematch after rematch after rematch. I'm a big proponent of I just want to see the division move on from a lot of things. I think we get stuck up in just all these guys just constantly going at the same people.
Good point. Yeah. I want to make another point also is like, especially if they get finished, like if a Kamar Usman gets finished, like he's gonna need at least like 6 to 8 months to recover. You know what I mean? Like, or like if Israel Adesanya gets finished, like he's gonna need a lot of time to recover before he can even have the immediate rematch, which holds back the division even more. So I think yeah. So I think I don't, in certain instances I don't mind it. Like if the guy is a huge star, it was a really close fight, and you think that will do better than the next guy who would fight for it. Like I don't mind that. But like a Kamar Usman, Leon Edwards, even that, like you could have got Khamzat Chimaev fighting for the belt by now, you know, and he's a bigger star already than Kamar Usman. I think more people would tune into to Leon versus Chimaev than Usman Leon 3. Or like, yeah, that's what I think.
I agree with that. And another thing that I want to say is that for sure, I think that I've become accustomed to immediate rematches to the point to where if we do see a close championship fight, and let's say my favorite fighter is the champion and there's no immediate rematch, I might be a little bit salty. But I do have to say, even when the UFC is a business and they're trying to make money, I think it's better to not have immediate rematches because let's say we have an Alex Pereira win over Izzy, and I think it's more promotable for Izzy than to fight a guy like Sean Strickland, where you put him in there as a co-main event for a pay-per-view or even a main event for a fight night. If you want to do like a big fight night in New Zealand or something like that, that's a big fight. Now Izzy is fighting for his right to return to a belt championship. You know what I mean? So I think that also you have Alex Pereira. Let the guy defend against someone new. He just became the champion. Give him the opportunity to establish himself a little bit. Does he really deserve this belt? Let's see. Let's find out against Robert Whittaker. I think that would be massive. And then if Pereira can get past Whittaker and we see Izzy knock out a guy like Strickland in New Zealand, that's crazy. And now you have this massive rematch that has been built up a little bit more. You know what I mean? Which is what I loved about Whittaker fighting Cannonier, fighting Gastelum before he fought Izzy. I really like the fact that he went through a lot, and Till, of course, that he went through 3 guys. I don't think you have to go through 3 guys necessarily. I think that's a little bit much. I feel like Whittaker, after beating Cannonier, should have just got the title shot. I don't know why they gave it to Vettori. I guess Whittaker was injured after fighting Gastelum, but I think, listen, if a champion loses and they've been on top for a while, you know, just one more win and get them in there. That's what I think. Now, if they've just won the belt and then they lose again, it's a different story. Maybe they have to get 2 or 3 more wins. I can understand that. But for long reigning champions, put them in a big spot in their home country, main event or a co-main event on a pay-per-view, and let the new guy who just became the champ prove it. Let him actually establish himself a little bit. So that's what I think. I think that immediate rematches are being used incorrectly. We should have never seen Brandon Moreno and Figueiredo 4. The fans have seen it all with those guys. And like, do I think Moreno's the better fighter? Now he is. But because these guys have been fighting for 5 years, I can't like confidently say that Moreno was the better fighter for the rest of history. I mean, Figueiredo at one time was the younger guy. He beat Moreno arguably twice too. It's like, come on, man. They're evenly matched. I get it, but I don't need to see it so often. So
Right. And also, like, after that second fight where Moreno dominated Figueiredo, why did we need to see a trilogy match? And
Yeah.
to follow up on the Alex Pereira thing, I would love, and like I said, I'm a huge Izzy fan, but I would love if they just scrap the rematch. Let's see Pereira do something new. Let's see him go up to 205 and fight Jamal Hill for double champ status. I don't care that he hasn't defended it. I
Yeah.
don't care that he was behind on the scorecard. Dude, let's just see something new and fun. Like, I'm so sick of all these rematches. Like, let's have some fun, UFC, you
Yeah.
know?
I also think
I
it does.
agree.
I also think it
True.
helps those fighters like a Kamar Usman or Leon Edwards, at least like taking some time off, getting a win, and then going for the immediate rematch again, so they can really clear their head. You know?
Yeah. I think, having these long reigning champions as a number one contender, like going out there for a completely different fight where they're not fighting for a belt, I think that's massive for promotion. I think that's going to blow their name up that much more. There's something to be said about them getting like a big win in one of those spots. You almost think back on the days to where they had never been a champ to begin with. They're fighting their way up to the top. It would remind me of Izzy getting his win over a Derek Brunson or something like that. If he actually gets to fight Sean Strickland instead of going in there to fight Alex Pereira, and I like the idea of Pereira stepping up to 205 to take on a Jamal Hill. So yeah, any other closing statements?
Yeah, and I feel like another thing is that a lot of people are coming at this from a perspective of like this is what the fans want or this is what's good for business. But I think it's unfair to the fighters. Like if you imagine like the situation Charles Oliveira was in, where just a few years ago nobody gave half an ounce of a shit about Charles, and then he became one of the biggest stars in the sport or whatever. Like there's somebody like that right now. Let's say there's somebody like that right now, but they're at the very edge of their prime and they're going to start declining soon. You might waste that if you decide to have fucking an immediate rematch with Kamaru and then Colby Covington faces him 17 more times or something like that. You waste that and you don't ever get to see that. And I think it's unfair that these fighters put their entire life's work into this and they have a very limited time on top. And we don't get to see that because every time one of these fights happens, it's going to put the division on hold for an entire year.
Yeah.
Right.
And with the
Yeah,
Volk
and it
Max
also
thing,
I just want to say it enforces these guys that get a title shot. Let's say they've never been a champion like Colby. They lose and then they just go out there and get one win. They think they're going to get it again because these champions, they lose and they get an immediate rematch. So if I lose, why I need at least one more win and that's it. Like I don't like that at all. I feel like if the UFC were to lay down some ground rules to tell these contenders, listen, if you just got your opportunity, you got to at least get two more wins, man. That's the bare minimum.
right? And that's what I was just about to
these
say.
contenders fight, man.
Right. With the Max Volk thing, like Max lost a close decision. He realized, okay, well, even though it was a close decision, I'm still down 0-2. So he went and put on a masterclass against Calvin Kattar. And then he put on a fight of the night against Yair Rodriguez. And then he earned his third shot. And yeah, he got dominated, but like he at least, I respect that he honored the fact that he's like, he wasn't like, oh, I'm Max Holloway, I should just get a third fight because I was an established champ and that was a close fight. No, he like, let me get back to work, you know?
And it looked better on him. Imagine if he had jumped into it, and even if it may have been closer, what if he lost again? Then we don't have the master class over Calvin Kattar and the win over Yair. Those wins add to his resume.
100%.
Speaking of resumes, I do have a question at
Since
the end of the
Robert Whittaker
podcast.
too.
What were you saying?
No, like it's just like Robert Whittaker too. Before this Izzy fight.
100%. So the last thing that I want to discuss, we have a couple more topics, but one big one that I want to get to, and we'll see if we want to talk more after that, is how do you determine who the GOAT is? So we talked about this on the last podcast, Jared. We talked about it a little bit. We're not really going to give our rankings, but I just want to discuss how we determine who the greatest of all time is. For me, a big part of it is defending your belt. Like, how long have you established yourself as a dominant champion? Have you moved up a weight class? That's not always necessary, but it definitely adds quite a bit. And how dominant are you? Have you really separated yourself? Have you created a gap between yourself and all the other contenders? Jared Grapples, what's your take on this? How do you determine who the GOAT is? How do you put Anderson Silva ahead of a guy like Demetrius Johnson? Or how do you put a John Jones ahead of a GSP? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, for me personally, I feel like it's like the achievements everybody can agree on, and that's why it comes down to title defenses and how many titles you have and stuff like that. Because everybody could agree that everyone in the UFC, the thing they want is that belt. So like objective accomplishments, and then there's also like kind of tied for me are these secondary accomplishments like, oh, this dude has the most knockouts or whatever. Sure, but some people are grapplers. Some people don't really care about that, but it's still impressive. So I do consider that, just not as much as those objective things that everybody's looking for, like how many wins you have and how much you're losing and how much title defenses you have and stuff like that. And then kind of tied with those like non-objective things like the how many knockdowns, do you have a submission record like Charles or something like that, is longevity, like how long you're able to stay on top. Because I feel like somebody that goes in, if you were able to just go in, get a whole bunch of belts and leave and retire, I feel like that would be less impressive than if you did that. And then you also have like a B side of your career where you stay an elite fighter for a really long time. I feel like I kind of talked about this last time. Like if you have a kind of B side of your career where you're past your prime that's worse than you would expect, then it drops you. If it's better than you expect, then it raises you. And if it's about where you'd expect, I mean, it does nothing.
Does nothing. Okay.
I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
As far as the GOAT, I think I do get a little frustrated when people try and diminish, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Jared. You brought it up and it came into my head. When people try to diminish the value of finishes, I think finishing someone's probably the most, unless it's like some weird fluky like Arnold Allen, Calvin Kattar crap, or like dude tears his ACL. But the finishing someone is probably the most impressive thing you could do in MMA besides like just outright like 50-43 in somebody. And I think someone like Anderson Silva, his longevity and his not necessarily the longevity past his title defenses, but the years that he was the champion, the finishes that he racked up are some of the most impressive finishes you'll ever see. The come from behind against Chael Sonnen, the front kick to Vitor, the James Irvin, Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner dominations. I think those hold a lot of weight. I think, obviously longevity, title defenses, resume, who did you go against, and like how often were you in peril in your reign? And I think someone like my hot take is I think Demetrius Johnson's number 2 all time. I view him a lot highly than a lot of other people. I hear people say that he's 5th or 6th. I'm like, you're on crack if you think Demetrius Johnson's anything lower than. Honestly, I think if you have him, and I don't know what y'all's list looks like, but this is just my opinion. And if we want to go back and forth on this, we can do it. I think if you have Demetrius Johnson anything lower than 3, I find that just to be disrespectful. The things that he
14,
did.
actually. No.
You're fucking.
Is 4 okay?
I got him 4, bro.
Okay, 4.
I got him
sure.
right behind. Wait, yeah. Continue.
We'll give you. I'll give y'all 4. 4 is understandable, but like I just think that I think his division was severely overlooked because people they were not giving flyweights their due, and they were not really looking at these guys like Joseph Benavidez, Henry Cejudo, and then you look at like what's his name, John Dodson. These are really impressive wins and guys that he dominated. Henry Cejudo, and I think well-roundedness is also another aspect that should go into the GOAT discussion. How well-rounded were you? It's not necessarily the top thing on the list for looking at the GOAT, but I think it's an important thing. You look at what DJ was able to do, same with a guy like John Jones and GSP, the boxing that they showed, mainly with DJ, the boxing, the Thai boxing, the knees and the clinch, the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, the kickboxing, he could do it all.
And on top of that, he's still adding to his resume. And I just want to add this.
Yeah.
I think that being a champion in ONE FC, especially at bantamweight, and let's not forget, he was a flyweight in the UFC. He's now stepped up to bantamweight, and ONE FC is the second best, promotion in the world, and it's in Asia, right? So a lot of them are trying to get that corporation. They're trying to get lighter weight class people into their promotion, and for me, bantamweight in ONE FC is maybe not at the same level of the UFC, but it's just a small step below. I count it. I count that as adding. He's a champion. I got to count him. He's going to pass Anderson if he gets another win or 2.
In a weight class where he's severely undersized.
Yeah, he is undersized.
I mean, you look back at what bantamweight in the UFC, you could just see it against fights like Dominic Cruz and all that. He was very undersized for that division. And I mean, even if he was in Bellator, well, the champion is Horiguchi, or at least was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he definitely was the champion at least a couple months ago. Well, he already beat Horiguchi, so he would, he would definitely have a claim to be, that weight class's champion in Bellator. And so I think he has showcased the ultimate resume and well-roundedness and just everything you would want out of a greatest of all time. Same with John Jones. Those are my top two.
So let me ask this, and no one really brings this up. What about the steroids? Because I feel like John Jones's legacy is much more tainted by PEDs than these other guys. For example, I know Anderson had his issues. GSP never really had any issues, and same with Mighty Mouse. And I feel like, one of John Jones's biggest wins is an asterisk. And I think that, listen, I think he's the GOAT, but when do we actually talk about that? I feel like we never discussed that.
I'm a bit of an apologist when it comes to John Jones's steroid failures. I think that a couple of them, now he's had a handful, I want to say at least 3 or 4. I think a couple of them, I can't remember the exact issues, but a couple of them were proven to be tainted supplements and stuff like that.
Like
I
second
think
Gustafson won.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So and that was a very impressive performance. But I also think that people use those steroids to kind of undermine what John Jones was doing in the octagon. And you brought up that second DC fight. I think that's what you're referring to. One of his most impressive wins being, having an asterisk because of the steroids. There was nothing he really did in that fight that was kind of enhanced by steroids. I mean, it was just a perfect masterclass performance.
Can I say something about steroids when you're done?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll be quick. No, I wouldn't say perfect because DC was kind of boxing him up at first, but I mean, just the technical ability to kind of break down what DC was doing, the attacks up front with the lead leg, and then eventually using that lead leg to the knee to kind of set up that head kick. I mean, it's just what he was doing. He's just so far ahead of the game. It's like Gordon Ryan. Who gives a crap if he's on steroids? He's so far ahead, it doesn't matter.
I definitely disagree on the steroid thing because it's just like steroids improve your physical performance. Even training MMA is a physical performance. You know what I mean? And if you're in fight camp or something like that, and you're able to train your ass off because you're physically enhanced and stuff like that, and one person is able to put in 3 hours of super hard work in that day, and because you're physically enhanced and you won't be overtraining because your body's able to recover faster and stuff like that, John Jones able to do that exact same thing like multiple times a day. And let's say that he's partying and doing all of those things as distractions or whatever. It's still at least making up for the distractions he has and stuff like that. And I think that it is definitely worth something. Now, for me personally, since the kind of the way I esteem like the greatest of all time discussion, I'm just concerned with whose body in the octagon is the best fighter. So I'll still call John Jones the greatest of all time. But I do feel like his cheating definitely is real cheating that affected something, because like you're not going to go and put something in your body that people are going to question you about if it doesn't actually affect your performance. Like if he could do it without it, why would he have risked his legacy for it?
I mean, the evidence was so concrete that they completely like got rid of that win on paper. You know what I mean? That he had over DC. And I understand that John Jones is technically like really good. He's on another level. He's got a really good fight IQ. As you said, Jared, he has the body of work to prove it. And for me, that's what's most important when determining who the GOAT is. What have you actually proved throughout your career? But, we also have to look at guys like GSP that don't have those same accusations. Like we don't have that same concrete evidence to look at GSP and say, well, he also did this same thing that John Jones did, or same with Mighty Mouse. But Jacob, how do you determine who the greatest of all time is? And how do you figure that out?
I think it has to be a mix of a bunch of things. I think it has to do with overall, like how good you are in the octagon. I think it has to do with resume. I think it has to do with domination. So when it comes down to that, I mean, like the guys who look at John Jones, 14 title wins. Look at GSP, like I don't know how many titles wins he has, but definitely a lot. Anderson Silva, maybe the best like title reign ever. So I know after that he kind of went downhill, but still, like nonetheless, like that title reign is something I can't ignore. You look at Mighty Mouse, also one of the best title reigns of all time. So, and then you also look at a guy like Khabib, who, in my opinion, is number 5 just because of straight dominance. Like he doesn't have the resume like these other guys, and that's why he's at number 5. but in my opinion, he's the most dominant fighter of all time. So that has to count for something. So
Let him know.
Sorry.
I,
So
I do have
number
a take
5
on
for me.
Habib, and here's the thing. Like Habib has 13 wins in the UFC and he's undefeated. Volkanovski has 12 wins in the UFC and he has more title defenses against 2 like long reigning champions. Now Habib never beat a guy that was he never beat a current champion that was a champion by the time that he beat them, right? And I'm just going to say it. The 29-0 is impressive, but Volkanovski wasn't out here fighting these taxi drivers.
Let me ask though, how many times did Khabib almost lose?
How many times did
Yeah,
Habib fight? How many times did Habib fight at 185 pounds? Like he just didn't.
Yeah, but how many
Only
times
lost.
did Khabib have a chance to lose like Volk did against
Volk has
Ortega
never.
or
Volk has never.
Holloway's second
Well, you're
fight?
right. Volk had one fight, but so
Or the
Habib.
split decision.
Habib had a little bit of a fight with Tabao that a
Oh
lot of
my
people
gosh.
But
look
that
at
was
and say he
that
didn't
was
really.
way before.
But he was in the UFC, and the same thing is, listen,
But that's
not
like the argument for Islam Makhachev like not being like the GOAT because he got knocked out. In the
well.
beginning.
Listen, for me, Islam's not even in the GOAT discussion right now until
No,
he
but
does
like
something
eventually,
about,
like that could be that's the same
for
as
sure.
just like
But
bringing that up still.
I don't mind. I don't mind getting knocked out early on in your career. What I look at is for sure. If you've had like a really, really rough first start of your career, that's definitely going to be taken into account. But if you've gotten finished one time, you lost one fight, to me, I can really look past that. I mean, Mighty Mouse has lost fights, right? Obviously, GSP lost some fights earlier on in his career. He lost fights as a champion. I think it's pretty clear cut and dry when I'm looking at like the top 4 guys. Where it gets tricky is like the 5 through 10, 10 through 20. That's where it gets hectic. Like, how do I put Habib in front of Volk? I don't think there's a great argument. I really don't.
I think. Well,
I think just because of dominance,
The wins are basically neck and neck. Volk, like, here's the thing. You can just say, well, Habib didn't really completely annihilate Ally Quinta.
But then he annihilated.
Oh,
He
this narrative. We're doing this.
He 50-45 them, but you could say, hold on. You could say, oh, that's not a
Could
good
have been
take.
worse
You
than
can
that.
say this.
Oh
You
my
can say
goodness.
that he had an absolute stinker against Tabao. And
Yeah, that's
Volk,
bad.
to
That's
me,
not
like,
good.
here's the thing about Volkanovski. I understand that some people gave Max that fight, but I think Volk won. And I really think that you can make a really good argument for that. For me, like, Volk has even talked about it as being like a really, really bad night for him. He said that he was going through a rough time going into that fight, injuries, couldn't sleep, all this stuff. And
Sounds like
that's
some Paulo
just
Costa.
one. That's just one time. That's
But then
it.
he also got knocked down by Mendez.
Yep.
But getting knocked down by men,
Habib's never been knocked
And
down.
almost choked out by Ortega. Habib's never been in a position of almost being finished, and he's never been in a position of almost losing a fight.
Right.
To the
I
scorecards.
understand that. I understand that. I get that. Like that is definitely something to be said for sure. I just think that because they have different styles, like let me say this. If Charles Oliveira had never lost and it was just kind of his style to get dropped in his fights, let's just say hypothetically, let's say he never lost, but he would just get dropped in his fights and just come back as this monster to finish everyone,
I am
putting
so
on these
holding
wars.
against him.
If he had racked up 15 wins and like 5 title defenses, you would all be considering him like.
But Volk doesn't finish
five.
people like that.
But we
though.
also have to erase 9 fights from our memory in order to do that, which I don't think is
Of course,
very reasonable.
Okay. Well, all I'm saying is that I think Volk to me is ahead of Habib. He's just defended more times. Habib defended 3 times. Volkanovski's defended 5 times. Volkanovski's beat both Jose Aldo and Max Holloway combined 4 times. Those are the 2, consensus second and third best featherweights of all time. Habib doesn't have any of those wins on his resume. He has not beat a
RDA?
top 3. RDA, I don't think is a top 3 best lightweight of all time.
Okay,
He has good. He has former
Top 3 fair.
champions on his. He has former champions like Connor, of course. RDA.
That's just because he wasn't given the opportunity. I mean, if
But hold on. I just want to say this, and then I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
Because people say the opportunity and all that. Well, listen. Like Leon Edwards, if you beat Kamaru Usman, fantastic. You beat the pound for pound number 1 guy. Don't ask me to put you ahead of Kamaru Usman on the all-time list. So you not sticking around is a great business move. It's good for you, but that doesn't mean that we have to just ignore the other guys that have done more than you. And that's all I'm saying about that.
What I'm saying is the opportunities. I'm talking about not necessarily Oliveira. I'm saying if Habib got his title shot whenever Eddie Alvarez was getting it against RDA, or whenever RDA was getting it against Pettis, if Habib was getting the title shot then, he would have dominated Pettis. I know this is all hypothetical, and I
Right.
know I'm just making up stuff, but in my opinion, he beats Pettis. We already know he beats RDA. We know he mauls him. He beats Eddie. We know he beats Connor. Like, if this dude got his title shot, and it all played into politics. Connor got his title shot when
Right.
Habib was supposed to. So Habib had to fight Michael Johnson and Edson. Two fights that, those are two fights. That's
They're good
you know,
wins.
that-
They're good wins too.
great wins. What he did in that first round against Edson Barboza should be illegal. I think that like those two fights, that's a long period of time to not be fighting for titles. And I think it's just a disservice to just I don't know. I just think the dominance that he
but
has
at the end
showed.
of the day, he didn't, and that's it.
No,
Like
that's
Volk
fair.
also, Volk is a striker, right? And he's beating these world class strikers. Habib, when has he fought the former champion that's like a phenomenal grappler? RDA is more of a grappler now at the latter half of his career, whereas in the beginning of his career, sure, he was well rounded, but he liked to strike a lot more. I feel like Volk's wins over these world class strikers like a Jose Aldo, who a lot of people still think is the featherweight GOAT for his striking. Max Holloway, second best featherweight in a lot of people's minds before Volk. So I think that maybe we won't agree on this, but I can't budge when it comes to the Volk man. But
Can I
other
ask you-
than that, like let's say Usman and like an Izzy, like how do we determine that, right?
I
Can I
think
ask you
Usman's
just
gotta be
a
up
quick
there.
question?
Yeah.
So what happens to Islam's ranking if he let's say he dominates Volk the same way he
Yeah.
did Oliveira? Where does he go now?
First
What's his
of all,
ranking?
I think Volkanovski has to go down because, again, like if he stayed a featherweight, he probably could have got a bunch of more title wins and moved even further up, but he didn't. He chose to move up, and if he loses, I have to bump him down a little bit. And then, of course, then I would say Habib's ahead of him. If
If he
Islam,
loses, Usman's got to be in front of him too.
I think you can say that as well. I don't know because Usman doesn't have the same wins as a
I mean, he
Volk.
had Tyron Woodley, and then he
True.
had Colby Covington twice, and then he
True.
had
I know.
Jorge
Burns,
Gilbert.
Yes,
Oswald
I
twice.
think they get a lot
RDA.
closer. They definitely get a lot closer. It's just
I mean,
it's
also the Korean
it's a horror
zombie
for me
doesn't
to
count,
bump
man. That
Volk.
was like
It's too tough for me to bump Volk that two down.
I
But
think-
anyway, I do have to say this: like if Volkanovski loses to Islam, listen, Islam just beat Charles, who is maybe top 3 lightweights ever, and Volkanovski, who in my opinion is a top 5 all-time fighter. Like that's got to throw him up there right next to Habib. I think he's at like if Habib's 5, now Islam might be 6. And if Islam defends one more time against a Beneil Dariush, who's a tougher grappler than someone Habib ever fought, he moves ahead of Habib straight up.
I have a video coming out tomorrow saying the exact same thing. I think if let's say he defends his title 3 times this year, which that can happen, and he has, dominant performances, I think he's a top 10 fighter of all time.
Oh, I
I
think
think
that
about
one
that,
without a doubt.
About that.
And again, I think when does he pass Habib? I want to ask you guys that. Jared, I want to please chime in. And also that's the next question I would have.
Yeah. So about that Usman and Volkanovski thing, I feel like the important thing about that, I realize you guys were a little behind that. I wanted to jump in on that. Though.
Yeah.
Leon Edwards knocked him out. You know what I mean? I think we could all agree that the way that is like, I feel like it's more forgivable for that than if you go out there and you become Miss Makachev. You know what I mean? And I feel like that would drop him considerably more because anyone can get caught. I'm not saying that it's not a perfectly skillful the technique that he was practicing and setting up and stuff like that. But that kick lands one time, and I feel like it's much more likely for something like that to happen than for you to luck your way into consistently getting taken down and mauled round after round. You know what I mean? So I do feel like if he loses, it's going to drop him down a lot more than that head kick dropped Usman.
I can understand that. Even though it's jumping up a weight class and completely different style.
I mean, that was his choice. You know what I mean?
Is.
But like,
and guys have done it before. Guys have moved up a weight class before. It's not like there's 100-pound difference. Like Islam's like some Godzilla. He is a 55er. People have moved up and won the belt. So
yeah,
Yeah,
I feel
think
like
Islam-
it's just as much so that there isn't an Islam at 145 as that there is at 155.
or there's not a
True.
really good grappler in general.
yeah,
No.
But also, I think for Islam to pass Khabib, I mean, look, like the Charles win, just getting the belt in general was more impressive just versus like Charles over Alaquinta,
Yeah.
especially the way he did it. Also, Charles is the guy who beat Gaethje. He beat Poirier. He finished those guys. So I think that counts for a lot. and then Volkanovski, like you said, like you consider him a top 5 pound for pound fighter ever.
Yeah.
Regardless if you think that or not, he's still number 1 pound for pound in the UFC. So that counts for something too. Khabib never
Yeah.
the guy who was number 1 pound for pound in the UFC. Yeah, he's moving up a weight class, but still, if you're number 1 pound for pound in the UFC, you should be able to like translate into other weight classes. So yeah, no, that counts a ton. I think you beat a Dariush, then like yeah, that's 2 title defenses versus Khabib's 3. But a Dariush is a grappler, which is not the people Khabib beat in his title reign. You know, Khabib beat a bunch of strikers. What's his name? Fucking Islam will have beaten 2 very good grapplers and 1 potentially
Phenomenal
the best striker in the UFC. So yeah, I would say if he beats Volk, especially if he does it convincingly, and then he beats Benny, I think he's in front of Khabib. But if you still want to have Khabib up in front of him, then he beats a Fiziev, which I think he does. And then he has to be in front of Khabib. And at that point, he's got to be top 5 of all time too. Top 4.
I think if he gets that far, I think he's top 4, bro. And I think that by that time, maybe DJ will be 3. Like Anderson's holding on to that 3 spot for dear life, in my opinion, because like it's not that he wasn't dominant. It's just that like I feel like other people are going to pass it relatively soon because listen, the defenses that those guys were getting back in the day were just not over the same kind of competition that guys are facing these days. They're just simply not. And it's just harder to defend belts in the 155-pound weight class 2023 than it was for Anderson to be defending in like the 2010s. You know what I mean? So like, yeah.
Also, Anderson was like a weak wrestler too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and nobody was able to like expose that, you know, like I know Chael was like
kind of
beating him, but like
Sonnen was taking him down. Man, I really, really hope that Volkanovski beats Islam. Like I listen, Volkanovski, to me, he's kind of like he's just a freak, man. Like he's kind of like John Jones. He seems so unbeatable and so talented, like physically impressive at featherweight that it's hard to imagine him losing, but man, like I really don't see him getting a great chance to beat Islam, and it kind of pisses me off, man, to be honest.
Can I just make one quick point about the Anderson thing? People love to try and act like his whatever losing streak just didn't exist. Like, and it doesn't matter. It's like if Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls, but the rest of his career he went 6-10. It's like that means something, you know? The numerous losses that has to play when we're picking hairs when it comes to like this ranking at the very top. I think that losing streak has to mean something.
Yeah.
But at the same
time, it wasn't so bad. It's not like he was getting chinned left and right.
It's like I really, really think that it's just that age that everybody
definitely is.
All these fighters, when they hit a certain age, we see them just take a steep, just fall off a cliff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with Anderson Silva's, he still nearly beats Michael Bisping, legitimately gets a win over Derek Brunson, you know, and he doesn't get finished by all of these guys and stuff like that. And it's just like, I feel like you could make an argument that is better than what a lot of people probably would have thought if right after he lost to Chris Weidman, you said, yeah, he's actually going to stick around for 17 more years. I feel like a lot of people would have assumed worse things would have happened. So I don't think you could hold him against him that much because it's still really, really impressive.
I think, I don't know. I think we're being a little bit too generous to him to say the bar of him not getting finished is like somehow impressive. I think that whatever 6-5-6 losing streak was just,
Rumble in his prime got finished, but not Anderson Silva. You know what I mean?
Right. No, yeah, for sure.
I really do think that it is very impressive that somebody fought, like physically outside of the best they've ever been is in there competing against these younger guys that are legitimate contenders and stuff.
But he got finished by Uriah Hall. You know, like let's not act like that didn't happen.
Yeah, that was a bad
one. That's a different chapter of his career. That's like
that's completely
that's him.
Chapter.
That's him though. Like we can't act like that's not part of his career.
Yeah, and if we had Khabib come back when he's 50, I'm sure you could find him something. Like,
right.
Come on.
But part of the fighting game is knowing when to leave. I think that's part of your legacy. I know like there's a lot to be desired with Khabib, but also like if Anderson was planning on retiring right before that Chris Weidman fight, and Dana kind of persuaded him to come back. imagine if Anderson Silva left before that first Chris Weidman fight. He would be
I'm
undisputably the GOAT.
honest, I
You
really
couldn't even
wouldn't.
dispute it.
Yeah.
People would regard him higher. I wouldn't, because I really, really do value those people that try to challenge themselves and stuff like that. Because everybody says like, "Oh, it's unfair for you to ask these people to stick around, and it's bad for their health," and it is. So those people that actually risk it, I think it's important that you need to regard how impressive it is when they had nothing to gain. They already were as good as they're going to get, and they put their health on the line and stuff like that. And I feel like it's almost disrespectful when we're all like, "Oh, they wanted to entertain fans and still improve their lives work and stuff like that," after they are realistically not at a point where they can do it. They know it. They're smart people. They just don't care and did it anyway. And I feel like it's almost trashing on them when we lower them for just doing what they want to do with their lives.
No, I understand that, but this is like a legacy, like this is a sport,
Nitpicky.
and we're kind of splitting hairs here when it comes to this. Like this man lost to Jake Paul. No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna get into that.
Yeah. So guys, we're gonna stay on for just a little bit more. The last thing I wanted to ask before we leave, and this is gonna be like a real quick convo, but do you guys see a path to victory for Volkanovski? I know it sounds pretty clear cut and dry, like get up with when he takes you down and mount off offense, but like how does he get it done? Like,
Just
can you
stand
guys
up, bro.
yeah, just stand up, dude. Can he get it done? And like, if so, is it more likely that he lands some kind of a knockout that Leon found on Kamaru, or is it more likely that he wins via decision? Because I actually think it's probably more likely that he wins by a knockout, to be honest.
Which is crazy to say because he doesn't have the knockout
Doesn't
power.
even exactly doesn't have
He can kind of sting, but yeah, I agree. Yeah, especially given how defensively sound Islam is. I think the game plan for Volkanovski is so. Of course, obviously, you can't let it get to the ground. Well, how do you prevent it from getting to the ground? Well, a lot of that has to do with as soon as the bell rings, you got to establish octagon control, and it's going to be tough going against a guy like Islam Makhachev because that's one thing that he loves to do. But Volk is a lot like Izzy in the sense that he doesn't mind giving up octagon control because he's really good fighting backwards. But I think for this fight, he can't fight going backwards because you're just giving Islam a perfect chance to shoot. I think you have to start with the leg kicks. I think you have to weaken Islam's legs to make those takedowns a little bit sloppier because he's not going to be as explosive coming off of those takedowns because of, his compromised legs. You have to get him backing up. You just have to have perfect entries and exits. Like you have to make sure when you're coming in, you're safe, and when you're coming out, you're also safe. And you just gotta give Islam a lot to deal with. You have to just do what you normally do. A lot of feints, a lot of just mixing up the strikes. You got to be careful kicking though. You can't risk Islam catching one of your kicks. I think this has to be more of a boxing oriented approach. You just got to find ways to get him backing up. You have to do a lot of stuff up the middle. I know I just said don't do kicks, but like selectively do front kicks, uppercuts, knees. You gotta make Sure Islam knows when he enters that you have something ready for him. And you also have to take advantage of the fact that I love Islam, but I think one of my biggest critiques of him is that at times he can be too patient and not as open with his hands. You got to take advantage of those moments where he's not getting off offense and you're the aggressor and the first one to take action.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, you're right on the fact that he definitely has to take a more like a heavier boxing approach in this fight because he loves going to the lead body kick. He loves throwing his lead leg to the body, and obviously he likes the leg kicks, but he really has to be careful because Islam could catch a kick. And for me, what worries me the most is, and I understand that him and his team are just being honest, like they're saying that they 100% expect to get taken down and they're going to fight just as they would normally fight, which is actually, it kind of seems like a good thing to do, because if you want to be confident on the feet, if you want to have success, you have to go in there and you have to do what's needed to be done to actually like land your combos. And Volkanovski is a really confident striker, but I just don't understand how it's possible for him to fight without the fear of the takedown, because even though like you're expecting to get taken down, like he has this thing in the back of his mind where he's like, fuck, this is like the best grappler in the sport. Everyone talks about how he's just different on the ground, not only his strength, but his ability to like keep guys down. And I just think like, if you're expecting to get taken down, I almost feel like he's gonna be a little bit too overzealous on the feet, and that's just going to be bad news for him. And I think, fuck, dude, it's so hard. Islam's hard to hit. He's got this tight guard, and although Volk is going to have the speed advantage, which might be important for him, I don't know if he's going to be so confident with his hands. And like, I just can't really see him tuning up Islam, man. It's hard for me to really pick him in this fight.
Yeah, I just think real quick, I don't want to dominate the conversation. I'll be real quick. I think also having a great guard game is going to be huge for Volkanovski, because one of the things that Islam's not the best at, he's still all right and good, but he's not a great guard passer. I've seen him struggle against Nick Lentz. I've seen him struggle against even, I can't remember if it was Drew Dober or Thiago Moises, one of those two guys. I think it was Moises. He kind of struggled to pass those guys guards. So I think for Volkanovski, having a really good guard game to kind of keep Islam's top game neutralized, and utilize butterfly guard to kind of elevate Islam to prevent him from, because I mean, the thing that makes Islam so dangerous on top is just how suffocating he is with his hip pressure and all that. If you utilize a lot of butterfly guard, you can neutralize a lot of that hip pressure and keep him elevated, and even use that to kind of get back to your feet. But sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually.
Oh,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Joe, you can go.
Okay. So I mean, obviously, you guys are saying a lot of the things that I was thinking, but I one thing that I didn't hear said is that Volkanovski, he loves those floating steps and stuff like that to kind of march forward and stuff like that. He does a lot of I don't want to say a lot of, but side kicks to the knee and oblique kicks and stuff like that. I feel like when the chance we're giving is for him to win by stoppage, I feel like he should kind of full on, Khalil Roundtree, this type of thing.
Yeah.
Like, if because it's going to be like a southpaw versus orthodox style.
I don't
matchup or
mind that. Like
something.
just a big hyperextension kick to the knee.
Yeah. Because like there's southpaw versus orthodox. If there was some way that Volk were able to just get himself a little bit more bladed than normal, and then just throw a side kick from hell on Islam's knee, I feel like that's one of the more likely ways he could win. I'm not
Make
saying
this
that
fight
I'm
a little
predicting
dirty
it.
too.
Yeah, that I feel like that. I mean, some people think that should be a banned technique because you could Jones. Have you seen Jones do this like jumping oblique kick to Anthony Smith? He barely missed it, but that could ruin someone's entire career. Like, I feel like it is a dirty strike, even though it's legal. It just seems like a really dirty strike because it has these long-term repercussions. Like, again, you could ruin someone's whole career. You can, it could really fuck someone up. But continue.
I mean that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, and I feel like in my head, I'm kind of, call me a little bit of a nut here, but I kind of just feel like, what vibes do I get out there? I feel like with somebody like Volkanovski, just like if they were to accomplish something great, I feel like the talking point, like I don't see a reality where he could go out there and be all like, yeah, I knocked out Islam, or I jabbed him to a decision or something like that. But if it was just like, oh, he just got really gritty and he decided to just stomp the fuck out of his knee, that's the way I could see it happening.
Yeah, make this fight dirty. Islam's so good at getting in and out of distance. He's so good at just knowing when he's in, when he's out of distance. Get this fight a little bit dirty, like get him off tempo when he's going in on an entry. Kick him in the leg, make him have to, when he goes in for his resets, throw something at him. Make him, mess up his tempo.
Imagine if he did that in like Abu Dhabi against Islam. You would have trouble leaving that country alive.
Then he calls out the crowd like Colby Covington versus Damian Maia style.
Yeah, I could see Habib jumping in the cage if that shit happens, bro.
Yeah, I don't even see an outcome where Volkanovski beats Islam, honestly. Even like unless Islam gets injured, like I just can't see it. I mean, like, I think if you're gonna beat a guy like Islam, like first of all, like you're gonna have to have some power, and I just don't think one punch power, one punch knockout power, or one punch kick strike power. And we don't see Volkanovski knocking out these guys like with one strike. Not at all, like he couldn't knock out Korean Zombie. I mean, I know they stopped the fight, but he didn't knock him down, like, or knock him out cold. And I think, like, if you can't knock out Korean Zombie, like, you're not knocking out Volkanovski. Even a banged up Max Holloway. I know he's got a great chin, but still, you don't think Islam's chin's gonna be better than that. Also, like a fucking Brian Ortega. I know he also has a good chin, but still, like, I mean, these are 45 pounders. Like, Islam's a 55er, and he does have a great chin.
And he's so hard to hit too, man.
Yeah, he's also hard to hit. I also think people are underestimating Islam's striking going this fight too.
Yeah.
Like, I was rewatching the Oliveira fight. I actually rewatched it a couple times. Rewatched it a couple weeks ago. Then I rewatched it yesterday. And the thing that I didn't remember was how good on Islam was doing on the feet before Charles pulled guard. I know it was like for like a minute, but nonetheless, like he hurt Charles in like the first exchange, like straight up, you know. And I think people are underestimating Islam striking. Like I think he does have the ability to hurt Volk too on the feet. So like I don't know if Volk is gonna even have success on the feet too, because like Islam's a great counterpuncher. Like Volk may have a little bit of success, and Islam may land like a big, powerful punch, and it'll back Volk back Volk back, and then Islam will shoot and take him down. I just can't see an outcome where Volk wins. You know, and Volk said it himself, and his team said it himself. We know we're going to be getting taken down, but you can't get taken down by Islam. If you're Volk,
how is he? I just don't understand how he's. I understand like Volk is extremely hard to hold down, but Islam is.
And he does. It's not like he's got like some ridiculous
whole game around
jiu-jitsu.
keeping guys there, and
The
he's
size
not
discrepancy is
doesn't have, like,
huge.
the skill. Like Brian Ortega doesn't have that kind of grappling, and neither does Chad Mendez. I think honestly, if Volkanovski makes it close and wins 2 rounds, I will be shocked. Like I'll
if
be
he doesn't
really
get finished in the first 3 rounds, I'd be shocked. Like I just think Islam's gonna throw stuff at him that he's never seen before, especially on the ground. And like Volkanovski, like I just think he's like a bit delusional in a way. You know what I mean? And like it's rightfully like he's in a shitty division. Like there's not
I don't know if
diverse,
it's shitty.
there's no diverse fighters. Like you know what I mean? Like Max
That's
Holloway
fair.
is literally a boxer. That's literally it. Korean
Right.
Zombie's like 40 years old. Brian Ortega is like can't wrestle. You know what I mean? Like yeah, he's
The
got
top
some
wrestlers like Josh Emmett.
Yeah,
but like
that's
these
pathetic,
guys aren't diverse fighters. Then you go against a guy like Islam Makhachev, who literally could be one of the best
Do it
grapplers
all.
ever, who could fucking strike too. Like obviously, like Volk's gonna be confident, and I just think he's gonna have a really rude awakening, and like I think he's gonna get smoked. I think he's gonna get finished. Like honestly,
Man.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if it's the first round. Truly, I think
Dude,
the first time
Agreed.
I
Islam
won't be
gets him
surprised
down-
either. Man,
Agreed.
I really wish Volk stayed down at 45, but at least we have a glimmer of hope, like a slight smidge.
There's
of
no
it.
hope. I don't think there's any hope.
There's
I
a
just-
smidge, bro.
But how is he gonna win? Other
Dude,
than
I'm
victory?
telling you, man. Like GSP has lost to Sarah. Like Volkanovski.
But these guys had power though, or they had good like submission
for sure.
game, like, you know
But
what I
at
mean?
the end of the day, like you have to give the number one like pound for pound fighter in the UFC a chance, somewhat of a small chance to beat a guy only one weight class above them. Like
I just
can't.
If Islam can't close that distance, how is he supposed to? Is he?
Yeah, like what if?
Him to
That's all I'm saying.
outstrike
Like,
Volkanovski?
what if Volk is so fucking fast at 55 and powerful and explosive because maybe he's like filling into his old athletic frame? There's a chance that he's like even crazier at 55, whereas most guys move up and they lose a bit of their power. There's a small chance, but I don't see it, man.
But he expects to be taken down then, though. Like still,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
I think
he's
once Islam
expecting
gets
to
his
get taken
hands on
down.
him,
yeah.
Like,
Once
what's gonna
Islam
happen?
gets him down, he's gonna know like it's.
I think you're gonna see a look on his face where he's
Yeah.
like, "I've never felt
Yeah.
this before."
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
he's fought fucking bums like Korean Zombie and Brian Ortega. That's why.
I think
Okay.
like the interesting thing for me is how great of things he could have done if he stayed at one. Like if he just went
Yeah.
out there,
I
he
agree.
stopped Josh Emmett. Now Aljamain Sterling, if he wins his next fight, is going to come up. You know what I mean? He could have literally put on one of those like I think I'm the greatest of all time by just ducking Islam Makhachev. In my opinion,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I respect it.
Um,
It is
Dude,
the
I mean, like
mindset.
if he did that, bro, I'm telling you, like beat a Josh Emmett, beat a Gayer, beat a Arnold Allen,
retire.
Aljo moves up, then retire before like a Tapiria comes to the title, and you're like top 3 all time.
But I respect it though. I respect.
I
it's like the
respect
Izzy
it
thing.
too. I mean,
It-
he said that. Listen, these challenges aren't getting me out of bed the same way as Islam Makhachev, and I want to be like I want to have this fire in me, and that's what makes Volk such a fucking
Badass.
beast. Like he's a
Hell
champ
yeah.
because he's got the mentality. Obviously, like if he didn't have this mentality, he wouldn't be as good as he is. He wouldn't train as hard as he does. Like you can't change these fighters. Like they want to stick around, they want to fight. It is like I'm not a fucking UFC champion. I don't have the same mentality as them. It's easy to say what I would do if I was in their position, but I'm not. So
I have a
I
question
hope-
for you guys.
yeah.
So like we talk about Volk's confidence, how like important it is to his career, especially the last few years. I mean, you look at the difference between the first 2 fights against Holloway and then the recent fight, like it's night and day,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it does have to do with his confidence, straight up. you get smoked by a guy like Islam. What does that do to his confidence? I feel like we're like assuming that him just going down is just gonna like make him like gain all that confidence back. Like, what if he's just
Depends on how he
completely
loses.
different?
If he gets knocked out, I think it's really bad for him. If
I
he
think
just
any
gets
way
like
he
submitted
I think
or
he gets finished. I think any way he loses, I think that hurts him, like his confidence. Because I just think anything will at this Volk is so good because he has this mentality that he can't lose. And when he
Yeah.
loses, like I think that's done. You know what I mean? Like I think that's gone for I don't know if but yeah, like I still don't know if like a Yair beats him because I think Volk is just way better than a guy like that. But like who knows if an Arnold Allen or Ilya Tapiro may be able to knock him out completely or just beat him.
I think it definitely is something to consider for sure. But I think we have historical precedent to show that these guys, like, so for instance, BJ Penn, when he got absolutely dominated by GSP in the second fight, when he tried to become double champ, he got absolutely dominated. He came back down. The very next fight for his 155 title defense was against Diego Sanchez, and it was arguably his best performance. And then you get Israel Adesanya, who got in the later rounds embarrassed by Jan Blachowicz, came back down and had a great performance against Vittori. And then even like a guy like DC gets knocked out by John Jones, and then the next fight has a phenomenal performance against Ozdemir. I think like we've seen that these championship mentality guys, these double champs, can come back and show that they're still great. But it is definitely 100%
But
something
those
to
other
consider.
guys
like Amanda Nunes got beat by Juliana Pena.
Yeah.
I just
Back
think
and
it's a
beat her
little
up.
different. I think Volk, it's so much more, so important to his game, though. Like, I feel like these other guys, like, it wasn't as important to their game. You know what I mean? Like, I think Volk, like, his attribute, like, one of his top three best things is his confidence, you know? And I think you're going to
Yeah.
lose it. So, like,
I think what gives Volk the confidence though, and this is just what I've seen and I've observed, it's his like he's like a blue collar worker. You know, for example, the fact that he stepped in to be a backup fighter when he's already like a long reigning champion, when he knows that the chances of him fighting are very slim and he's going through this whole training camp where there might be injuries involved. And that's a big risk because if you do fight, like you're not even 100%, you don't know who you're taking on. I feel like the average guy wouldn't take that on. Volk seems to be like someone who is also really good because of how hard he works. Like he seems to be one of these guys with a chip on his shoulder that wants to prove everyone wrong. Like I feel like the fact that he dominated Max, dominated the Korean Zombie and Ortega, that was to prove a point to people. Like this is how good I am. And I think he's going to want to prove a point if he loses again because people are going to write him off. So I think, for example, if he gets knocked out, that's just bad for him durability wise. I think his confidence, on the other hand, will also take a hit. But if he gets beat by a decision or if he gets submitted and, you know, he didn't take tons of brain damage, I think that he'll bounce back and have some success. You know, he is 35, so he isn't going to be on top for that much longer, but like he's a young 35. He didn't really start fighting until like his mid to late 20s anyway.
Yeah.
Great
I have a
point.
question for you guys. I mean, I know we didn't want to do another discussion, but I wanted to if you guys don't mind, talk a little bit about the Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo fight that's being targeted for UFC 287. Because
Yeah.
at first I thought that Aljo would for sure win the fight. You know, Henry has been gone for 3 years. Aljo he gets on top of you, it's over. But the more time goes by and like to close sooner to the fight, I'm starting to lean towards Henry. And the reason I'm starting to lean towards Henry is because a few reasons. First of all, is like first of all, Aljo, I mean, he's had a bicep injury. I feel like this seems a little odd that like all of a sudden now he's agreeing to fight in early April. Like I feel like there's a chance that the UFC, like I know they don't love Aljo, they're like, okay, like we may move off of you, or like we may do an interim belt or something. I feel like he may have let the pressure get to him at least. So he may not be like fully like healthy at all. So I think that's one of the things. I think the other aspect is that Henry Cejudo is one of the smartest minds in MMA history. And he's gonna have to he's coming back for a reason. He didn't need to come back. He definitely sees something in Aljo's game that he thinks he can exploit. That's another reason. The other thing is that like, how do we know Aljo's gonna be able to take him down? You know what I mean? Like we're not certain about that. And then on the feet, when was the last time Aljo's knocked someone down? I don't think ever. You know, like so like
He is
obviously
pretty decent on the feet though.
What?
He is pretty decent on the feet.
Like, but Henry Cejudo is definitely better on the feet. You know?
Yeah, I would
For
agree.
sure.
So like I just think like, yeah, if Aljo gets him down, it could be a real problem. But I don't know if he takes him down, and Aljo has had some gassing out concerns too.
Yeah, he has gas.
And Aljo's best
Yeah.
rounds are his early rounds too. And like, what if it takes him what if in the first 2 rounds he can't get Cejudo down? Like, what's gonna happen then?
Cejudo also has
I
that,
think
that like unbreakable will, dude.
Mhm.
He's not a guy that is gonna quit in a fight. And I'm not saying
he's not gonna
Aljo,
quit, but
he's
just gonna
definitely
become less.
showed some signs of like, falling apart mentally later on in the rounds with Piotr Jan. So
He
Yeah, so like,
also
what if he doesn't like get out? What if Cejudo can stuff enough takedowns in the first 3 rounds to and then what happens after that? I think Cejudo completely smokes him in that instance, But
yeah,
and at the same time, like who's gonna have better takedown defense, Peter Yan or Henry Cejudo? I think Henry Cejudo too.
Yeah, also one of Cejudo's, and I feel bad, Jared, after this, if you got something you can chime in because I feel like you haven't spoken in a little bit. But I think one of Cejudo's best qualities is also just his ability to adapt. Um, he's so good at adapting and overcoming obstacles, like against Marlon Moraes, where he was pretty compromised with the leg kicks. Then in the next round, dominates, and then Moraes is a known gasser, so like that's not like the biggest accomplishment, but at the same time it is. And then like even against DJ in the second fight, DJ had his legs severely compromised, and then he came back and won that fight. And DJ, who's one of the best wrestlers in MMA history, really couldn't take down Cejudo a whole lot, and Cejudo was the one winning the wrestling exchanges. So it's like, how do we expect a career like high 20s to low 30% takedown accuracy wrestler like an Aljamain Sterling? And I know a lot of those numbers are kind of depressed because of how high of a volume he shoots the takedowns, but still, like, he's not like I wouldn't consider him like an amazing wrestler.
yeah.
I just don't see him taking down Cejudo.
It also took him against Yanni, he was literally what was he fucking 4 and 25 or something?
Yeah.
I think Jan is probably a tougher matchup for him. That's why I still say I think Jan is the best guy in that division. But man,
not if he loses to Merab though. If he loses to Merab, that's it.
If he loses to Merab, yeah. But I think that Aljamain Sterling, like, I feel like activity and his size, his physical attributes, like he's a really like built guy in that division. He's really strong. And I think he's gained a lot of confidence from winning the belt legitimately off of Piotr Jan. And I think even if TJ was healthy in that fight, I was still going to pick him to dominate TJ and like finish him. So, I mean, I won't be surprised if it's close. I think that Aljo has a chance, but I think like on paper, Henry Cejudo should win this fight.
I think that while I agree, and I have predicted that Henry Cejudo, like if this fight actually does happen, because we've seen some ridiculous stuff in the past, that Henry Cejudo would win. I think that he's going to be able to kind of walk him down, be aggressive, and put it on him, and Aljamain Sterling's not going to be able to take him down. But I feel like just how weird and how dynamically Aljamain Sterling is able to kick. He turns his hips over really well from all these weird angles, and you don't know whether it's going to hit the head, the body, or whatever. I do feel like if he has one of these performances where he's able to, because he's also way longer than Cejudo,
Yeah.
in the way he fights and stuff like that. I feel like there is a way to win. I just don't think it's super likely, but I think relying on those kicks and stuff like that, hoping Cejudo doesn't want to take him down off of catching those kicks or something because he's so good at the ground grappling. I think that's probably going to be his path to victory. Lots of kind of stalling and backing up. What do you guys think of that?
I think I said this summer on one of our earlier podcasts. I said that if Aljamain, is able to finish him, don't be surprised if it's like a head kick or something like that. I mean, I think it's possible that Aljamain could catch Cejudo. Cejudo might be a little bit slower these days. He hasn't fought in a long time. He's older. I mean, how old is he? Like,
he's like 2 years older than Aljo.
Yeah,
is he really?
I think it's more likely he wins by head kick.
I mean, I think
than
Aljo
a
wins by
submission.
submission if he wins, like in the earlier rounds. That's how Aljo
Right.
wins the fight.
I
But
could see.
if it goes past round 3, Aljo's not going to win the fight.
Yeah, he's the same age as Aljo, or a year older. Yeah.
I could see
2
a
years
game
older.
plan. I could see a similar
I keep
game
thinking
plan.
Aljo's 35. Yeah.
I could see a similar game plan from Aljo, like in the second Jan fight, where it's just constant takedown attempts in hopes that one of the you're basically just looking to create scramble opportunities. And because Aljamain Sterling is so great in those scrambles to be able to find a submission or find a very compromised position, like, taking Piotr Jan's back twice in that second fight. And then like against Sandhagen and stuff like that. Like, he's so good at out of the scrambling opportunities to be able to find your neck or find your back or, get mount. He's so good at that. So if he could just consistently just shoot nonstop takedowns in hopes of just creating some sort of opportunity like that, I could see him edging out a decision or maybe just snatching up a submission from Cejudo.
I've got a feeling that he really wants to strike, and I think he's gonna play some mind games and stuff like that. Like already, like he was saying, like I think you guys would be surprised. Like even in a pure wrestling match, I could give him issues. The difference between like Division III and Olympic gold medal and stuff like it's huge. And he's well aware of that stuff. He's probably trained with some D1 guys that kicked his ass in college and stuff. He's well aware of this stuff. And I feel like he's trying to hype up, like, yeah, I'm the grappling guy. I'm gonna grapple him. And I think he's gonna go out there and look for a head kick, like after like doing like a level change head kick, and then that's the rest of his game plan from there. Just lots and lots of striking.
I think that's probably likely, to be honest.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, we're gonna wrap it up. We had a great discussion, really good conversation. If you guys are still watching, please leave a like, a comment, and let us know what kind of topics you'd like to see us cover for the next debate. All of these guys' socials will be down in our description. Until next time.